In a rain-soaked arena, two young swordsmen face each other. The one with light hair, Weiss, smirks with condescending confidence. He questions if his opponent, a mere commoner, truly believes he can achieve victory, declaring that the fight was lost from the very beginning. An official raises his hand, signaling for the battle to begin. As Weiss lunges forward, a voice from the sidelines urges someone named Lilith to watch closely as the fool who defied them is publicly humiliated. The duel ends swiftly. The dark-haired youth stands victorious over the fallen Weiss, whose sword lies shattered on the ground. From the stands, a young woman cries out Weiss's name in anguish. This defeated combatant is Weiss Vincent, a figure widely known by the moniker of the villainous noble. The perspective shifts to a young man in a different world, sitting before a screen that displays a victory message against the character Weiss. It is revealed that after losing to the protagonist, Alan, Weiss was used as a shield by the Demon King, a turning point from which he lost everything. The chronicle of Weiss's life ends with a single, stark fact. He died. In that same moment, the young man playing the game collapses, his controller falling from his lifeless hand. Inside a grand mansion, a maid weeps silently, her gaze fixed on a long, forebodingly dark hallway. Her fear is realized as Weiss Vincent appears, standing over her kneeling form. He holds a riding crop, his posture radiating a cold, newfound authority. A cruel, knowing smirk spreads across his face as he licks his lips, savoring the power he now wields in this new life. His eyes shot open, then narrowed with dawning awareness. Before him, a young maid knelt on the floor, her hands bound. The sight left him utterly bewildered. He thought, his mind reeling. The maid seemed just as lost, her voice trembling as she asked where she was and who he was. He recoiled, brandishing a riding crop he hadn't realized he was holding, shouting in alarm, what the hell? His thoughts raced. Just a moment ago, he was playing a game, but now a woman was tied up in front of him. The situation made no sense. The maid's voice cut through his confusion. Why, Sama, what's wrong? She asked. He was struck by her beauty, but the name she used gave him pause. He repeated the name to himself. Weiss. It felt familiar, and he had a strange feeling he had seen this girl before. A wave of cold dread washed over him as the pieces clicked into place. He gasped, wait, could it be that I have become the villainous and abusive noble Weiss? Looking at his reflection in a nearby mirror confirmed his worst fear. There was no mistake. He was now Weiss Vincent, the villainous character from the school game, Noblesse Oblige. He recalled the game's title, Noblesse Oblige. It was a school fantasy world he knew intimately, having completed its story multiple times. In that game, his current self, Weiss, was the villainous noble, the primary antagonist who stood in the way of the protagonist, Alan, during the school story arc. He was the lowest kind of scum, a man who used his immense power to relentlessly torment those weaker than himself. This path of cruelty led to his thorough defeat at the hands of the protagonist. Having lost everything, Weiss eventually became a servant of the Demon King, and in the end, his fate was to be used as a disposable shield, dying an ignominious death. His thoughts snapped back to the present. He looked at the bound girl before him, and a horrifying realization dawned. This must be the maid, Lilith Scarlet. He remembered another detail from the game's lore. The original Weiss had a cruel hobby of tormenting Lilith. His face twisted in disgust at his predecessor's actions. What a horrible bastard. Why would anyone do something so vile? He had to do something. He resolved to untie the poor girl immediately. But as he moved to help, a thought stopped him cold. If he, as Weiss, suddenly changed his behavior so drastically, wouldn't it seem suspicious to her? The maid looked up, her expression unreadable but questioning. She remained bound, but Weiss, looking down at her, couldn't bring himself to walk away. He decided that was enough for one day and began to untie the ropes binding her wrists. As he worked, his gaze fell upon her neck, and his eyes widened in alarm at the marks left there. He saw her trembling, a poor thing suffering so much. A thought crossed his mind. He should try it. He raised his hand, preparing to act. With a surge of resolve, he placed his glowing hands towards her and invoked a healing spell. A gentle warmth enveloped her neck as the magic took hold. The marks vanished in a wisp of steam, and she felt a wave of relief. It had worked. He recalled the information he'd found in a strategy guide from his past life. It was a hidden healing magic, a skill the game's developers had included, usable from the very start. He quickly tried to cover his tracks, turning away with a feigned indifference. He insisted she not misunderstand, claiming he was merely practicing his healing magic and that it had nothing to do with her. Her confusion melted away into overwhelming gratitude. With tears welling in her eyes, she clasped her hands and thanked him earnestly. But then, her expression suddenly darkened, and she fell into a somber silence. Later, Weiss reflected on the strange interaction. He couldn't comprehend why she would thank him when he was the cause of her suffering, wondering if his predecessor had broken her spirit to this extent. Lilith, meanwhile, expressed her surprise, admitting she had no idea he could use healing magic. Her innocent remark only deepened his turmoil. He looked away, his face shadowed with guilt and confusion, unable to respond beyond muttering her name. He looked at Lilith with a pained expression, apologizing for all his past actions. He promised her that he would not behave that way any longer. His words left Lilith standing stunned outside the grand estate, her eyes wide with disbelief. Later, in the opulent dining hall, Weiss sat alone at the long table. The family butler served his meal while Lilith observed from a distance, her expression still guarded. Zevis Avin, the butler of the Vincent family, was internally reeling. He recalled how the young master would typically declare the food tasted bad and hurl the plate to the floor. When Weiss suddenly addressed him by name, the startled butler could only stammer out a reply. He looked up at the butler and confessed that he had been wrong, admitting his past carelessness in treating food. He then added a compliment, stating that the seasoning was perfect today, too. Behind him, Zevis's shock intensified. Overwhelmed with emotion, the butler could only whisper the young master's title. His composure finally broke. With tears streaming down his face, Zevis threw his arms out and declared how extremely honored he was to hear such gracious words. The butler's dramatic reaction left Weiss flustered, thinking to himself that it was only a meal. In the background, Zevis continued to weep as Lilith and another maid looked on, equally moved, with one of them praising Weiss for being so wonderful. He sat amidst the emotional display and had a startling realization. The staff was so caught up in what they perceived as his maturation that they failed to notice the truth. He was an entirely different person on the inside. He considered the staff's emotional display, picturing his former self lashing out and throwing plates. The realization settled in. The old Weiss must have been a truly terrible person. Resolved to change, he stood in his room holding a long, thin rod. He vowed that from now on, he would not make the maid sad again. His first act, he decided, would be to dispose of this instrument, a thought which brought a look of pure, sparkling delight to Lilith's face. With the rod in hand, he walked through the estate grounds, his resolve hardening. He knew he must change even more. His thoughts turned toward the future and the grand academy that awaited him. As a noble, he was obligated to attend at the age of 15, and the entrance exam was a mere 2 years away. He recalled the original timeline with dread. After losing to the protagonist in the combat test, the reputation of Weiss Vincent had started its steep decline as negative opinions spread rapidly. He considered an alternate path. If he had not lost to the protagonist then, the future might have been different. A new possibility emerged, and he realized he had no choice but to seize it. He reached for the source of this new hope, a small, intensely glowing object lying among splintered wood. His expression hardened with determination, his eyes seeming to reflect the object's light. He swore that even if it took all his strength, he would avoid the path to ruin. The effort required was immense, leaving him drenched in sweat and gasping for breath. As he sat recovering on a tree stump, a sharp voice cut through the air, calling his name. Startled, he looked up to see a dark figure standing in the distance. He stood trembling, sweat beading on his brow, and pleaded that he could not move anymore, asking for a short break. Before him stood Mika Aodas, an S-rank adventurer, her expression severe. With arms crossed, she looked down at him and questioned if he was even taking the training seriously. After a moment's consideration, she acknowledged his state. "I see," she said, before instructing him to take a proper rest. Her eyes narrowed as she delivered a sharp ultimatum. That is, she added, if he wanted to be branded a loser the moment he enrolled at the academy. The words struck home. As he pushed through the grueling dual-sword exercises, his face strained with exertion, he reflected on his decision. He had used his family's connections to hire this incredible woman as his teacher, and now he was enduring her relentless critique of his every move, his stance, his knees, his wrists. A formidable figure named Mika Aodas is introduced. She is known as a swordsman who originally appears only at the end of the game, and is considered the strongest warrior in the royal capital. Her expression is one of cold amusement. Despite Weiss's plea for her to forget he is a noble and train him without mercy, the thought that she's extremely sadistic and frightening comes to mind. In preparation, Weiss receives a requested item from Lilith, thanking her. Lilith asks about the writing on the headband he now wears. With a determined look towards Mika, he declares that he will do his best, even to the point of dying. The world he inhabits, noblesse oblige, is revealed to be a death game of super high difficulty. It is a challenge that can only be cleared through repeated attempts, a grim reality underscored by the sight of Alan lying defeated on the floor. Determined to avoid such a fate, Weiss begins his training. He realizes that he has never properly trained his body, even in his past life. With the stakes being immediate expulsion or even death, he knows not a single second can be wasted. He acknowledges that improving his basic physical fitness is crucial for learning swordsmanship and magic, but the process is incredibly exhausting. Sweat pours down his face as he pushes through the immense strain. His new routine begins each day with the rigorous practice of sword forms, all under Mika's unwavering, watchful gaze. Following that, he endures hellish muscle training and runs endlessly to improve his stamina, pushing his body to its absolute limits. The cycle is relentless, repeating from morning until night, over and over again, without a moment's rest. This grueling physical exertion is supported by a carefully managed diet. As instructed by the young master, Zevis prepares a menu packed with protein to fuel his recovery and growth. He watched as 2 weeks passed since the training began. Weiss, shoveling food into his mouth, apologized for being a burden. The butler noted that while recovery magic could heal injuries, a proper diet was essential for building the body. Thanks to his varied support, he knew the young master could manage even a bit of overwork. Another week passed. 3 weeks into the regimen, sweat dripped from Weiss's brow as he pushed through the exhaustion. It was a hellish ordeal where every single day felt as long as a month. Before he knew it, the sun would set, Yet the training never ceased. Back inside the estate, Zevis announced that with Weiss now accustomed to the physical demands, it was time to summon the magic teacher. He called for the teacher to come in. Weiss, still feeling the strain from Mika's relentless methods, could only hope this new instructor would be a kindersort. As he wondered what kind of person would arrive, the door creaked open. A cloaked figure stepped into the room, their hat and mantle magically flying off to hang themselves on a nearby stand as a voice greeted him. The figure was revealed to be none other than Mika Iotas. Weiss collapsed to the floor in utter despair, crying out in disbelief as she formally introduced herself. She looked down at him, a wry smile on her face. She greeted him again, clarifying that she was a master of not only swordsmanship but also magic, before questioning the point of him reappearing in the same composition. Standing in the doorway, she listened as Zevis reminded Weiss that he had requested a kind teacher. The butler then elaborated, explaining that Mika is a genius magic swordsman, capable of using 2 of the 4 great magic attributes. She responded with a professional smile, assuring them they could leave everything to her. Weiss reacted with surprise, but her expression hardened as she promised to teach him gently. Her menacing tone filled Weiss with dread, and he stammered, questioning if she truly meant it. Her idea of gentle training was revealed moments later. Weiss stood barefoot on a rock beneath a powerful waterfall, screaming as the water crashed down on him. From a cliff above, Mika yelled for him not to close his eyes and to channel more magic power. He endured the onslaught as she calmly instructed him to keep it up for another 2 hours. Internally, Weiss screamed in agony, wondering where her promised kindness had gone, and realizing this was even more brutal than his sword training. His silent question was met with a firm explanation from his instructor. With arms crossed, Mika stated that to use magic, one needs mana, and the only way to increase that mana is through consistent, grueling training. She then delivered the final condition. He was to repeat this every day until he passed out. The declaration was too much for Weiss, who collapsed into the water, shouting his dissent. In the distance, Lilith could be seen running through the forest toward them. This brutal regimen became his new reality. From that day on, his basic magic training continued, and in addition, practical training with wooden swords also began. He and Mika clashed, his face a mask of exertion against her look of calm superiority. The practical training was no less forgiving. Mika effortlessly parried his attack, sending him stumbling backward with a cry of exertion. She coolly noted that he was still full of openings. He collapsed onto the grass, panting from exhaustion. Just then, Lilith knelt beside him, placing a gentle hand on his back and casting a healing spell to mend his battered body. As she healed him, Lilith promised to support him with her magic, encouraging him to do his best. Weiss glanced back at Mika, grimly realizing he had become a good punching bag for his sensei. Mika acknowledged Lilith's help, noting that it was a great assistance. As Weiss Vincent pushed through his exhaustion, his body covered in grime and sweat, a strange thought surfaced. He wondered why someone as inherently lazy as himself was suddenly able to work so hard, pushing his body to its absolute limit under a torrent of water magic. This new drive was a stark contrast to his previous existence. In his past life, he had been a living corpse, immediately running away from any challenge he had to face. He would give up and surrender without a fight. He pondered the difference between his past and present, questioning how it was possible that he could now work so diligently while being relentlessly assaulted by Mika. 2 months passed in this grueling routine. Weiss sat by the water, wiping sweat from his brow, the waterfall where he trained roaring beside him. As he rested, a hand gently came to rest on his head. He looked up, startled, to see Mika Iotas standing over him. She offered a rare, soft smile, telling him that he had achieved his goal in just 2 hours, which was quite an improvement. He felt a blush creep up his neck, wondering if this gentle pat was what his sensei meant by her promise to teach him gently. She confirmed his thought. That was right, she explained. Every time he achieved a goal, she would reward him with a pat. He processed this, a bead of sweat rolling down his temple. A strained smile formed on his face as he realized the ratio of reward to punishment. The carrot to the stick felt incredibly skewed. He looked up, perplexed by the simple reward system, only for Mika to interject, her expression unreadable in the shadows. She told him his assessment wasn't quite right. Lilith, approaching them, stopped short, sensing the shift in tone. Ignoring the tension, she stepped forward, addressing Weiss directly with a gentle smile. She announced that she had brought him lunch. Mika then clarified her role in his training. She explained that she was merely the stick providing the harsh discipline, as he likely received plenty of the carrot, or positive reinforcement, from others. She urged him not to forget the existence of that supportive role, the carrot, which allows him to do his best. As she spoke, Lilith stood by, holding the lunch basket for him. Lilith tilted her head in confusion at the analogy, but for Weiss, a profound understanding dawned in his eyes. He realized that the reason he could push himself so hard was thanks to everyone around him. His thoughts turned to Zevis, who managed his meals, and to Lilith, who was always by his side offering support. And, of course, there was Mika's sensei, who steeled her heart to push him toward growth. He acknowledged that without everyone's cooperation, he never would have made it this far. This was a stark contrast to the person he used to be, both the previous Weiss and his own self from a past life, who had only ever thought about themselves. He recalled his past life, a lonely existence where no one supported him, but also where no one ever scolded him for his failings. He now understood that what he truly needed was a balance of both sweet and harsh affection, the very thing he received from Lilith, Zevis, and Mika. With this profound realization, his eyes snapped open, a fierce determination burning within them. He made a vow. He would no longer live just for himself. His previous goal had been simple, born of self-preservation, to not die, to not be ruined. But his motivation had shifted. From this moment forward, he would strive to show everyone his impressive self, not for his own sake, but to ensure that Lilith and the others who had helped him would never be saddened by his failure. Standing resolute between Lilith and Mika, he declared his new path. For his own sake, and for everyone who supported him, he would avoid the path of destruction. His resolve immediately translated into grueling action. Under the sun, sweat and water streamed down his face, his expression a mask of pure exertion as he pushed his body to its limits. Nearby, Alan lay collapsed from the strain, but Weiss remained on his feet, his body crackling with energy. Mika's voice cut through his exhaustion, setting an impossible new goal, for hours, to be continued until he died. Despite the immense difficulty, he braced himself to continue. Weiss Vincent walks through the bustling streets of town, flanked by Mika, Aotas, and Lilith Scarlet. He internally wonders if this is supposed to be some kind of enjoyable date, being surrounded by two girls. They are in League Belt Town, a place Weiss recognizes as the first town the protagonist arrives at in the game. His eyes narrow with irritation. He thinks to himself that they shouldn't mess with him, feeling that this situation is a form of cheating. He turns his head slightly toward Mika, addressing her as Milk Sensei, and commenting that the town's security is as poor as ever. His observation is punctuated by the sight of thugs harassing a citizen in the background, shouting for them to die. With a confident smirk, he looks ahead and asks aloud, "Who is my opponent?" He reflects on his situation. It has been 3 months since he began training, and now, at what seems to be the right time, he's been assigned a practical test in this city. He wonders if this actual combat will just be a staged fight against some random thug. As this thought crosses his mind, Mika turns to him with a knowing, almost sinister smile. The expression catches him completely off guard, and his eye widens in sudden alarm. Lilith, however, misinterprets his anxiety for excitement. She clenches her fists and cheerfully encourages him to fight hard, telling him not to worry. She adds that she's thinking of picking the best opponent for him, making Weiss break out in a cold sweat. He cannot feel at ease at all. As the trio continues down the street, they are spotted from a distance by a man with a mohawk, who grins and points him out to his companions. The man's associates, a group of unsavory characters, leer in their direction. One comments on a girl with a nice body, while the man with striped hair specifies his interest in the little one, declaring that she's his type. Mika, covering her ears, loudly warns the thugs to watch how they talk, declaring that Weiss will literally kill them. Weiss looks on with an annoyed expression, while Lilith silently processes the thug's earlier comment about the cocky kid with the beauty. His annoyance deepens as he glances back at the leering man. He reflects on the town's notorious reputation, recalling that League Belt Town is considered the worst of its kind, a veritable den of thugs. He clenches his fist, thinking to himself how annoying the men are. His resolve hardens. Regardless of Mika's presence, he feels an absolute duty to protect Lilith at all costs. As he steels himself, Mika casually advises him to just ignore them, dismissing the thugs as not worth their time. Weiss turns to her, his expression shifting from surprise to a narrow focus. Hearing her words, Lilith's demeanor completely changes. She beams, a cheerful aura blooming around her as she happily agrees that Mika is right. Her sudden cheerfulness confuses him. Weiss glances at Lilith, wondering if he had merely imagined the incredible killing intent that seemed to radiate from her just moments before. She continues to smile sweetly as they approach a large building. The building is the local Adventurers Guild. Inside, the main hall is a spacious, 2-story establishment with a long wooden bar and several tables where other adventurers are gathered. The atmosphere within is noisy and bustling. At the counter, a bartender serves various patrons, including a man with a headband and a mysterious hooded figure. However, the relative peace of the guild is about to be broken. A trio of menacing men, one with spiky light hair, one bald, and one with dark, curly hair, glare forward with hostile intent. Their target becomes immediately clear. The 3 men surround Weiss, who stands with his head lowered. The one with the Afro-style hair looms over him, ordering the kid to step outside. A cold realization washes over Weiss. The men confronting him are the Boudin brothers, his designated opponents. Mika confirms his thoughts, listing their astonishing evil deeds: rape, robbery, kidnapping, murder, and slave trading. She explains that while they've avoided justice by paying bribes, the corrupt military police have already been arrested. With a confident smile, she declares them the perfect opponents for a real battle, as there's no need to hold back against such extreme criminals. Weiss, seemingly composed, agrees and suggests they head back. As they walk, she calls his name, drawing his attention to a scene of casual brutality in the street. Weiss looks on, his face streaked with what appears to be blood. Her gaze is sharp and analytical. She acknowledges his strong determination, but states plainly that he has no real combat experience. She continues, explaining that real combat is a path he must eventually take, so he might as well face it now. From a distance, Zevis watches them depart, a look of concern on his face. He understands the implication. If Weiss misses this opportunity, it's not guaranteed that Mika will be there to watch over him in his next real fight. He could end up facing it alone, a fate that has led many inexperienced fighters to their deaths. Back with Weiss, Mika offers a reassuring smile. She promises that she is with him now and will help if things get dangerous, urging him to enter his first real combat with confidence. A relieved Weiss thinks to himself what a reassuring person she is. That reassurance evaporates. Moments later, Weiss is being dragged through the streets by the Boudin brothers, his face a mask of pure terror as he screams for Mika, who is nowhere to be seen. He struggles against their grip as one of the thugs orders him into an alley. The devastating truth crashes down on him. He's been tricked. Mika's encouragement was a lie. She disappeared with Lilith, abandoning him after he picked a fight, believing she would back him up. Forced into the alley, his mind races. What should he do? He knows there's no backing down now, just because he's scared. With no other choice, he braces himself, his eyes narrowing with grim resolve. He recalled his objective, to cut off one of their arms. He analyzed the situation. Though they looked like simple punks, he knew they were skilled. It was 3 against 1, and he wasn't even sure he could win a fair fight. Killing them was not necessary. His mind raced back to just before the confrontation. He knew that if he let them drag him into an alley, a fight would be unavoidable. He needed a plan before engaging them. Mika's voice echoed in his memory, her expression confident. She had told him to simply follow what she taught him, and he would be fine. He remembered the specific lesson Milk Sensei had taught him as the thugs led him away. Meanwhile, from a nearby building, Mika and Lilith watched as the Boudin brothers pushed Weiss through a set of large doors, one of them urging him to hurry up. Now seated at a table, Lilith remarked on Mika's cruelty, finding it hard to believe she would deceive him like that. Mika calmly replied that without such a push, Weiss wouldn't have enough motivation. Lilith pointed out that a practice session where someone comes to help isn't really practice at all. Mika, her head now on the table, mumbled that she would probably go and help if things got truly dangerous, but her voice lacked conviction. Later, Lilith found herself in a tavern filled with ruffians. One of the men, the same bald thug from the alley, called out to her, asking if she was the kid he'd seen in town earlier. The man with the striped mohawk exclaimed that she was super beautiful, while the bald one declared it perfect timing. Lilith watched them approach, her expression unreadable. She is completely surrounded in the tavern booth. The men closing and introduced themselves as the band of thieves that runs things in the area. One of them, a man with a sinister grin, explains that they were short on girls to hang out with for the night and found themselves in a bind, gesturing towards other captive women tied up in a corner. Her eyes widen, pupils constricting into points of cold fury. In an instant, a violent spray of blood erupts across the room. 2 of the thugs stand amidst the fresh splatters, their backs to the viewer as they stare at the source of the sudden attack. Before they can react, a hand lands silently on the spiky-haired man's shoulder. The bald thug cries out in agony as he is struck down, his companions looking on in stunned disbelief at the unfolding chaos. The scene shifts to the memory of a lesson, as Weiss, poised with his sword drawn, repeats a critical piece of advice to himself. Move first. He recalls Mika's voice echoing from a hole in the wall while he was otherwise occupied. She had taught him that the most important thing in battle is to catch the opponent off guard, as the first strike that does so surpasses any other attack. She had elaborated with brutal clarity. Even a master of martial arts will die if their neck is broken before they can brace themselves, just as a master of magic will fall if struck before they can prepare their burial. He calmly faces the 3 stunned thugs. In short, he begins to explain, his strategy is simple. Putting his words into immediate action, he lunges forward, adhering to the principle of moving before his opponent does. His foot connects solidly with the spiky-haired thug's head. The kick sends the man reeling. As the thug is thrown off balance, Weiss pivots, his sword flashing out to strike the bald man. He reflects on his past, realizing he has always put off making decisions. He continues his fluid assault, remembering how he used to believe that tomorrow's version of himself would handle things. Now, he understands that time solves nothing. He resolves that from now on, if the necessary actions are already decided, he will execute them in seconds. With this newfound resolve, he leaps forward, sword extended, roaring his intent to change and cast off the lazy version of himself as he drives his blade toward the final thug. The attack is a success. Panting heavily, Weiss looks upon the scene as all 3 of his assailants lie incapacitated on the alley floor. He stands over them, analyzing his victory. He concludes that he won because he moved before the enemy could react. Had all 3 entered the alley combat ready, surging with mana and enhanced strength, he would have stood no chance. As he stands there sweating, a voice cuts through the silence, awarding him full points. He turns to see Mika Aodas standing nearby, having observed the entire confrontation. She elaborates on her score, clarifying that while she wants to give him full points, her actual evaluation is a 70. Weiss listens, sweat still beading on his face. Mika explains her reasoning with a critical eye, stating that if it were her, she would have cut off an arm inside the Adventurers Guild, calling that the truly proactive approach. Beside her, Lilith is deeply impressed, exclaiming that Weiss was amazing and that she would give him 200 points. Her critique still fresh in his mind, Weiss's thoughts turn to his mentor, Mika, and then to Lilith, a bead of sweat tracing a path down his temple. He was pulled from his thoughts by their voices. Mika chided him, asking why he suddenly disappeared and admitting it had been frightening. Lilith, meanwhile, offered a sheepish apology. As she spoke, a small, dark stain on the cuff of her sleeve caught the light. Despite the blemish, Lilith's expression was one of pure relief, her hands clasped together thankfully. His eyes narrowed on the spot. He questioned her, asking if the stain on her clothes was blood. Lilith quickly tried to deflect, touching her cheek and insisting it was just his imagination. But it was not his imagination. The truth of the matter was far more grim. A short time earlier, Lilith, Mika, and another woman had been held captive, their hands bound and their mouths gagged, lined up at a bar under the terrified watch of the establishment's owner. The situation had been resolved with brutal efficiency. Now, the captives knelt, freed from their bonds, before a man in a butler's uniform. The floor around them was a scene of carnage, littered with the bodies of more than 20 members of a notorious band of thieves, all of them apprehended. Later, in the tranquility of a garden gazebo, the full report of the incident was considered. While there had been no fatalities, the bandits had been beaten so severely that they were rendered unable to speak. She held a newspaper detailing the event. The article reported that the notorious Boudin brothers had also been arrested, an operation that succeeded with the cooperation of Weiss Vincent. His picture, a confident smirk on his face, was printed alongside the headline. Her gaze softened as she looked out from the window, the paper resting nearby. Resting her chin on her hand, she murmured his name to herself, a thoughtful, perhaps fond, expression on her face. Sometime after the incident, a formal letter arrived at the Vincent family estate. Weiss read the letter of thanks, which was accompanied by a cash gift, aloud to Lilith. He then turned to her, feigning ignorance, and asked what a band of thieves was. 1 year and 6 months have passed since the training began. Beneath a roaring waterfall, Weiss stands firm, his body honed and his gaze steady, a testament to his overwhelming growth. Previously, his days of intense training would invariably end the same way, running out of stamina and passing out from mana exhaustion, all under Mika Oda's watchful eye. But change had occurred. His eyes widened, a spark of newfound power igniting within him. Those kind of collapses no longer happened. Now he could shatter thick logs with a single, empowered strike, a confident smirk on his face. Later that night, he reflected on his progress. He could feel the warm flow of mana coursing through his body and had even developed the ability to detect enemies through walls. He knew he had grown considerably. Back at the estate, Zevis approached him to ask how the magic training was going. Weiss, seated at a desk, confirmed that it was proceeding well. He elaborated, however, that he was having a hard time with Milk Sensei's Spartan training methods. The regimen focused on the 4 elements of magic: fire, water, wind, and earth. The true challenge, he explained, was to train them all equally. As he spoke, he simultaneously manifested all 4 elements, leaving Zevis stunned and speechless. He privately considered Milk Sensei to be a demon, thinking her far worse than the Boudin brothers he had captured before. Zevis, however, offered a different reason for the training's intensity. He explained that the reason Mika pushed Weiss so hard was simply because Weiss's own talent was completely out of the ordinary. As Zevis observes the household staff, he reflects on the fundamental principles of magic. Typically, a person is limited to a single element. A maid with dark hair peeks through a doorway as he muses. His thoughts drift to the exceptions. Even an S-rank adventurer like Mika, he recalls, can only use 2 elements. A memory of the usual chaos, Mika, Lilith, and Alan in a heap on the floor, comes to mind. In stark contrast, he considers Weiss, who can command all 4. Zevis recognizes this as an exceptionally rare talent, visualizing the young man effortlessly wielding fire, water, wind, and earth. This talent, he believes, would have remained dormant if not for Weiss's recent change. Zevis admits his surprise at the boy's past carelessness, but never expected such diligent work. Had Weiss remained lazy, his potential would never have blossomed. His reflection concludes with a quiet sense of approval. Looking on with a faint smile, Zevis acknowledges to himself that Weiss has become truly admirable. The moment passes, leaving Zevis standing alone in a vast, empty hall. He looks down at a long, covered table, the grand room silent around him. The quiet is shattered by a jarring memory. A younger Weiss, face streaked with sweat and tears, crying out in terror. He clutches his head, apologizing and begging not to be hit. His pleas are directed at Mika, who stands over him with a wooden sword. Lilith steps in, demanding Mika stop breaking his nose. Mika turns her sharp gaze to Lilith, accusingly asking if she knew Weiss had been practicing magic behind her back. Her accusation hangs in the air as she turns back to the weeping boy under the full moon. She demands that he show her his magic. Still crying, he can only manage another apology. He complies. Rising to his feet, his tears are replaced by a look of intense focus. A bright, swirling aura gathers around his right hand, while a dark, shadowy energy manifests from his left, shocking both Mika and Lilith, who watch from a distance. He stood within the swirling dark energy as Mika and Lilith watched from the tree line. Mika identified the opposing forces at play, the special elements of light and dark. She knew that wielding these in addition to the usual 4 elements was an extraordinary feat. He turned his head slightly, a confident smile playing on his lips. He explained that he had kept this power a secret because he wanted to reveal it only after it was complete, admitting that, at present, it was still unfinished. Mika questioned his statement, repeating the word incomplete. He confirmed it, explaining that he still hadn't quite gotten the hang of the technique. His expression hardened with resolve. He declared that now, with the two of them watching, he felt he could finally do it. It was time to combine both light and dark magic, to bring his own original magic to perfection. As he levitated into the air, a vortex of light and shadow erupted around him. Lilith stared in awe, a smile spreading across her face, while Mika looked on in utter shock. This, he proclaimed, was the result of a year and a half of effort. Night gave way to day, marking the passage of time. Sometime later, guests gathered outside a grand estate for a formal evening party. Inside, the grand hall was filled with the low murmur of conversation. Amidst the crowd, Weiss covered his mouth to stifle a yawn. Lilith, standing at his side, noticed his weariness. She gently admonished him, saying a yawn was inappropriate, and asked if he had stayed up late or was still feeling the fatigue from the previous day. He waved off her concern, assuring her that it was fine. His thoughts drifted back to that moment of overwhelming power. It was after that display that his original magic had finally been completed. He reflects on the nature of his creation, a unique magic called Dark Heal. It is a fusion of two opposing forces, the restorative healing light of the light element and the corrosive dark haze curse poison of the dark element. The spell is designed to automatically heal all allies within a certain range, while simultaneously inflicting continuous curse damage upon any target recognized as an enemy. Although he had succeeded in completing the technique, the mana consumption was staggering, leaving him completely exhausted on the ground afterward. He acknowledged to Lilith that he still needed more training to increase his mana capacity. In response, she declared with a determined grin that she was going to fetch some strong liquor to wake him up. Before he could protest, she shot off with incredible speed, leaving him to call out in surprise at her sudden departure. Her sudden burst of speed lingered in his mind as he surveyed the crowded party. Her movements, he realized with a serious expression, were as agile as those of an assassin. His thoughts were interrupted when a particular guest caught his eye. He recalled hearing rumors about hidden guards within the Vincent family, but dismissed the notion as impossible. Just then, a soft voice called his name, and he turned in confusion. It was the same young woman who had caught his attention, now turning to face him directly, her long, light-colored hair flowing around her. He stared, a flicker of recognition in his eyes, identifying her as Cynthia, the daughter of Countess Violetta. He couldn't help but note her undeniable beauty, her shimmering hair, and her striking red eyes. As she offered a knowing smile, the full weight of the realization struck him. This was Cynthia Violetta, the main heroine of the game he once played. She greeted him with a soft smile, remarking that it had been a long time since they last saw each other, and addressing him by name. He stared back, his eyes wide with shock. Noticing his expression, she tilted her head and asked what was wrong, adding a strange, almost playful insult that he looked like a crushed goblin turned into muddy soup. His mind raced, a cold realization washing over him. His hand began to tremble as he remembered the fundamental truth of his existence in this world. The character of Weiss was universally despised in the game, and among all those who despised him, one person's hatred burned brightest. The memory was clear. In the original story, Cynthia loathed Weiss more than anyone. It was her hatred that had ultimately led to his demise. A vivid image of his previous lives surfaced, his body riddled with fatal wounds, a direct result of Cynthia's actions. Yet, the woman standing before him now wore a serene, almost dazzling smile. He internally lamented his decision to attend. He had only shown his face out of reluctant obligation as a member of the Vincent family. He cursed his luck, believing he should have avoided such a gathering entirely. He had never anticipated an encounter with Cynthia before their enrollment at the academy. He desperately tried to calm his racing thoughts, clutching his head. He reasoned that he hadn't done anything to earn her hatred in this timeline yet. It was still before the academy enrollment. Things were different. But as he fought for control, a foreign sensation intruded, a memory, or perhaps an echo, of the previous Weiss and his malevolent smirk. The feeling was disorienting, leaving him momentarily dazed. He could hardly remember what he was doing. His confusion was mirrored on Cynthia's face, who looked at him quizzically, repeating her own name as if he had just uttered it strangely. As Weiss faces her, a dark memory from the original story surfaces. A vision of his predecessor cornering Cynthia with a cruel grin, a weapon held ready as the single, malevolent eye of that past self watches from the shadows of his mind. The memory fades, but her words bring the past crashing back into the present. Leaning close, her voice low and intense, she confirms that she still hasn't forgotten what happened back then. Her accusation conjures the specific scene in his mind. She recounts how he used his noble title to forcefully invite her to his room, and then attempted to taint her with his filthy hands. The memory sharpens her present disdain. Her eyes narrow as she spits the words at him, her voice dripping with contempt. "You trash noble." Her venomous words strike him with the full weight of his predecessor's actions. He realizes with dawning horror that she loathes him so much she could kill him. He wonders what that bastard Weiss did to deserve this, lamenting how brazenly he attended the party. This, he thinks, is the worst possible situation. Seeing only one path forward, he acts decisively. He bends at the waist in a deep, formal bow, declaring that he can only offer a sincere apology to Lady Cynthia. His apology is a public spectacle. The surrounding party guests begin to murmur as they witness the scene. He continues, his voice clear, stating that it was all his fault, an act unworthy of a noble for which he is truly regretful. Her expression shifts slightly at his public display of contrition. She acknowledges his apology, stating that she isn't so cruel as to trap someone who is genuinely reflecting on their actions. However, she adds a cold caveat. He probably won't be forgiven at all. She watches him, still bowed, and admits to herself her own surprise. She never thought he, of all people, would be the type to lower his head in front of others. Her surprise gives way to a cool analysis. She thinks he's calmed down now, even if just a bit. From his bowed position, Wise hopes this act of public humility will lower the chances of his downfall. He would be grateful for even that small mercy. As Wise reflected on the outcome, he admitted to himself that he had wanted to get closer to Cynthia, a character he admired from the original story. For now, however, he concluded this was the most he could accomplish and decided it was time to find a moment to depart. He resigned himself to the belief that he and Cynthia were like light and darkness. Their paths were never meant to cross. He reasoned that for a disgraced noble like himself to approach a highborn lady was akin to flying too close to the sun. It would not end well. He resolved that he had no choice but to withdraw, but just as he made this decision, a hand firmly grasped his arm. To his surprise, it was Cynthia. Without a word, she took his hand and began to lead him through the throng of guests at the party. As they moved through the hall, their linked hands drew the attention of Lilith Scarlet, who watched them pass with a look of astonishment, murmuring his name. She then turned her gaze to him, her expression unreadable, and posed an unexpected question. If he didn't mind, would he like to dance with her? The request left him utterly stunned, his face flushing red as he stammered in disbelief. From behind, Lilith's voice cut through his confusion, urgently trying to get his attention. Under a clear sky, Weiss Vincent and Cynthia Violetta sit opposite each other in a garden gazebo, engaged in a refreshing tea time. Cynthia remarks on the lovely weather. He agrees, noting the sound of chirping birds as he looks out over the grounds of his family's grand estate. As she sips her tea, a question forms in his mind, a stark contrast to the peaceful setting. Why is Cynthia at his home? His thoughts drift back to the night it all began. In his memory, Cynthia stands close, asking him if he would like to dance. He recalls the chance encounter at a formal ball, where, for some reason, he was invited to dance with the main heroine, Cynthia. During that dance, she had noted his puzzled expression. She told him she was aware of the fact that he had changed, much to his surprise. He realized, then, that Cynthia somehow knew about his daily, rigorous training and preparation for entering the academy, likely through rumors circulating among the nobles. As they danced, her question had cut through his thoughts. She asked him if it was true that he didn't remember much about that day. He had stammered a confirmation, his mind flashing to the memory of an attempted assault incident. He didn't know how to properly apologize for it, and the recollection sent a jolt of shock through him. Snapping back to the present, he moves without a word, pulling Cynthia from her seat and dipping her low, holding her in a sudden, intense embrace. He holds her close, his face flushed as she leans in to whisper. Cynthia asks what about her, and then follows with a more pointed question. Has he also forgotten that he once told her he liked her? Her words leave him stunned and speechless. As the sound of applause fills the ballroom, Cynthia calmly notes that the dance has ended, seemingly unfazed by his shock. She then bids him farewell for the time being and walks away. He watches her depart, clutching his chest. For him, that moment wasn't the end. It was the day Cynthia stole his heart before simply leaving. This memory is inextricably linked to the imposing figure of his father, Agito Vincent, a cold man always flanked by severe-looking associates. The thought of his father brings another event to mind. The day a letter from him arrived at the Vincent estate. The letter's contents threw him into a panic. He cried out in disbelief, questioning why he was suddenly meant to host a dinner party with Cynthia at his home that very day. His shock turned to dread when he realized her carriage was already arriving. As his household staff, including Lilith and Zevis, scrambled to prepare a welcome, Weiss was overcome with a bad feeling. This recollection of events leads directly back to the present, with him and Cynthia now sitting together in the garden. He seethes internally, directing his anger at his father. He curses the damned old man, wondering what scheme he could possibly be plotting. His gaze falls upon Cynthia, and his conflict deepens. He admits to himself that he is genuinely happy to be with her, but he knows he cannot allow himself to get close. He remembers that in the original story, Cynthia was destined to end up with the protagonist, Alan. This knowledge paralyzes him. He fears that if he becomes close to her, the future will change, and the crucial events that are supposed to unfold between her and Alan will never come to pass. He panicked, a cold sweat breaking out on his brow. If the future changed, he would lose his only advantage, the knowledge of a scenario he was supposed to follow. His mind raced, replaying the potential consequences. Even defeating Alan in their upcoming test could have unforeseen effects. But to take the main heroine from the protagonist, that would shatter the entire story from this point forward. As he wrestled with these thoughts, Cynthia's voice cut through. Hey, Vaisama. He knew he had to somehow maintain a perfect distance from her. It was a precarious balance. Being liked would be just as disastrous as being disliked. She looked at him, her expression unreadable. She reminded him that he once claimed to have fallen in love with her at first sight, and then pointedly asked if he had forgotten about that too. She elaborated, explaining that his initial declaration had been too sudden and a bit arrogant, leaving her feeling dissatisfied. But now, seeing him offer such a sincere apology by bowing so deeply, a blush crept onto her cheeks. With a coy smile, she admitted that under these circumstances, she might not be opposed to his feelings after all. A heavy silence fell between them at the table. His composure shattered internally as a silent scream of panic echoed through his mind. The development terrified him. The very moment he'd worried about her liking him, she had shown this vulnerable side. He was stunned that someone so noble in appearance could be so unexpectedly gentle. This realization sparked another memory. Come to think of it, in the original story, the speed at which she fell for the protagonist had always seemed abnormal. A new understanding began to dawn on him. He considered the situation. Cynthia was certainly soft-hearted, a dangerous trait. But he also knew that once she falls in love, her devotion becomes absolute. This realization made him sweat. As they sat together in the garden, he knew he had to find a way to lower her affection for him. Opposite him, Cynthia let out a soft giggle. Her amusement only deepened his horror. She found his quiet side shy and cute, and to his dismay, he could feel her favorability towards him rising on its own, completely against his wishes. His internal panic erupted into a startled yelp. Just then, Lilith arrived with a tea service, announcing herself to Wai-sama as he recoiled in flustered shock. He quickly regained his composure, thinking that letting out such a pathetic moan was a mistake. Then, a new thought struck him. Perhaps it was a good thing. If Cynthia heard such an unseemly sound, her feelings might cool down. As Lilith offered a refill, he simply thanked her. From her position, Lilith observed Cynthia, who was now dreamily mumbling to herself about how cute Weiss was. Lilith concluded that the girl was hopeless and that she needed to do something about the situation, and quickly. Later, outside a grand manor, Cynthia broke the silence. She asked Weiss if he had heard from his father about the matter for that day. He took a sip of tea, sighing with resignation about engagement. Cynthia confirmed his suspicion, explaining that the dinner party was meant to be their introduction. She then added that while their parents had decided it, after speaking with him, she had also decided to agree to it. Meanwhile, observing from a distance among the trees, Weiss's father smirked. He mused to himself what a troublesome son he had. His companions stood nearby. One remarked that Weiss is similar in appearance to his father, being handsome, but that he's a bit shy when it comes to these things. The comment seemed to strike a nerve with the older man. He reflects with satisfaction on the recent events. Regarding his son Weiss and Lady Cynthia's engagement, he notes that Weiss finally had his chance to dance with a famous young lady. Believing this was what his son wanted, he took immediate action and settled the matter without hesitation. His method of settling things is revealed to be as eccentric as his personality. He laughs boisterously while playing in a sandbox with his associates, one of whom questions if he's proceeding with his son's approval. Ajito, patting the sand with a small shovel, declares that his son, that bastard Weiss, must be happy now. He dismisses his associate's concerns, ordering him to stop complaining and help with the sand tunnel. He asserts his paternal authority, claiming he knows exactly what his son wants just by looking at him. Nearby, a small child watches them, a look of fear on his face. Meanwhile, the subjects of this paternal insight stand before an opulent manor. A carriage waits nearby as Weiss and Lilith watch Cynthia emerge from the residence. As Cynthia beams from the doorway, the full weight of the situation crashes down upon Weiss. His face contorts in pure horror as he mentally screams at his absent father, questioning the very idea of an engagement. Later, he explains the shocking development to Lilith. He reveals that what he thought was a simple tea party arranged by his father was, in fact, a meeting to discuss his engagement to Cynthia. He elaborates, his distress growing. While arranged political marriages are common among nobles, he clarifies that this is different. A shadowy memory of his father looms over him as he explains that the man made these arrangements with the Violetta family purely out of a misguided belief that it would make his son happy. This bizarre act of parental affection is completely at odds with his memories of the man. He recalls how his father was a distant figure who rarely came home, a man he barely knew. He realizes with a jolt that this version of his father is nothing like the character who hardly appeared in the original story he remembers. The truth of his father's character begins to crystallize in his mind. A vivid memory surfaces, his father, beaming with pride, presenting him with an absurdly large pile of gifts. He now understands that his father wasn't distant or uncaring, but the very epitome of an excessively indulgent parent. The memory shifts to him as a small child, dwarfed by a cart overflowing with presents from his father. A bead of sweat rolls down his temple as the final piece clicks into place. He believes he now understands the fundamental reason why the original Weiss Vincent became a villain. He stands stunned as Lilith addresses him, her voice trembling and her eyes wide with a deep sadness. Tears stream down her face as she chokes out a plea for him to be happy with Lady Violetta. Before he can process her words, she turns and sprints away with astonishing speed. He calls out to her, bewildered by how fast she is moving. His path is suddenly blocked by Mika Aodas, who calmly announces the day's training quota. He must chase Lilith. She asks if he understands why Lilith is crying, explaining that the man she has supported for a year and a half has been suddenly taken by another. Mika states that even if the engagement wasn't his decision, she will not permit him to ignore the sadness it has caused. Her command is absolute. Return to the mansion with Lilith. If he fails, his punishment will be death. He shouts his assent and breaks into a sprint. A realization dawns on him. Lilith has always been by his side, so of course she would be shocked by the engagement. He owes her a great debt. As he chases after her, he acknowledges that without her constant support, he would have remained his former, lazy self. He reaches out, pleading for her to wait, but she screams for him to leave her alone, unleashing a wave of force that pushes him back. He grits his teeth in frustration, wondering why he can't catch up to her even at his full strength. The chase carries them through a forest and over a river. He continues to call her name, begging her to listen, but she insists that it's fine. It can't be helped, she says, because she is just a maid. She continued to flee across the estate grounds, even as Weiss's desperate words echoed behind her. He shouted that she was not just a maid, but someone precious to him. He propelled himself through the trees, trying to close the distance as he explained the situation. The engagement, he insisted, was something his father decided on his own. It was not his choice. He then called out to her again, asking if she knew about the servant system at the Noble Academy. He continued, clarifying that at the Noblesse Magic Academy, where he would be enrolling, only high-ranking nobles were allowed the exception of bringing one servant. He declared his plan to take her with him, confessing that it was because he trusted her the most. The words struck Lilith, who slowed, her mind racing to understand what this truly meant. She looked back while ascending a long flight of stairs, asking if his pursuit meant he was truly seeking her. Gasping for breath, he confirmed that was exactly why he was doing this. Her pace quickened again as she issued a challenge. Would he continue to chase after her forever? His body screamed in protest, exhaustion threatening to overwhelm him to the point of unconsciousness, but he roared a defiant in response. Hearing his unwavering resolve, a look of satisfaction crossed her face as she affirmed his answer. She finally came to a stop at the top of the long staircase, her expression softening. With a sense of finality, she acknowledged his effort, stating that she understood if he insisted that much. Turning to face him from the edge of a cliff, she made a startling declaration. From that moment on, she would be his mistress. The words stunned him. Before he could process it, she stepped backward, falling from the cliff's edge. Without a moment's hesitation, he screamed her name and plunged into the abyss after her. The two figures plummeted through the air, falling towards the river, winding through the deep canyon below. In the midst of their descent, she caught him, pulling him into a secure embrace. She told him to be at ease, promising to do her best, and assuring him that she would never tell anyone about the relationship they had just entered into. As they plummeted towards the canyon river, she held him close, a slight blush on her cheeks. She whispered, asking if their new arrangement was a secret love. Weiss, caught completely off guard by the question and the fall, could only stammer in confusion. His bewilderment was cut short as they plunged into the water below, sending a massive column of spray erupting towards the sky. The splash, momentarily forming the shape of a heart, marked a turning point. It was because he became involved in this affair with Lilith and was subsequently saved by her that Weiss ultimately found himself engaged to Cynthia. Elsewhere, in a rugged, open clearing, Alan stood looking towards a small wooden cabin. His expression was grimly determined as he steeled himself, murmuring his resolve. He turned his gaze towards a cave entrance where other candidates gathered. The entrance exam was almost upon them. He wondered if the original protagonist from the game was also fully prepared for this trial. On the training grounds, Mika Aoda fixes a stern gaze on Cynthia. She questions if the young woman truly believes her current level of magic is sufficient for enhancement. Cynthia, her face flushed with effort, firmly disagrees. She insists to her instructor, Milk Sensei, that she can still refine her power further. Mika then shifts her focus to Lilith, instructing her to lower her magic output slightly and to balance it evenly. Straining, Lilith affirms that she understands. Watching the proceedings from a short distance, Weiss Vincent remains silent, his expression unreadable. He watches as the bizarre training session continues, with Cynthia, Lilith, and himself all practicing with orbs of light. Mika observes them all, internally exasperated by the sight of Weiss's fiancée and his mistress training side by side, wondering why Cynthia is even there. The situation was indeed strange, born from a whirlwind of recent events that Cynthia herself was still processing. In a short span of time, she had gotten engaged and had also become a secret lover to Lilith. This tangled web of relationships was what Mika found so utterly baffling. From her vantage point, she could only think that the whole mess was ridiculous and incomprehensible. She wasn't the only one contemplating the absurdity. Weiss had his own person to blame. He mentally directs a sarcastic thanks to his father for making everything so complicated, vowing to lodge plenty of complaints when the man returned from his diplomatic work. As he stewed in his thoughts, Mika decided the time for basic practice was over. Holding a wooden staff, she announces with a smirk that they will now move on to practical sparring. She then poses a direct question to Lady Cynthia and Lilith. Have either of them sparred before? Weiss and Cynthia look shocked by the query, but while Cynthia hesitates, Lilith confidently affirms that she has, as does Cynthia a moment later. Weiss contemplated the latest turn of events. As if his situation wasn't complicated enough, there was another factor to consider. Both Lilith and Cynthia had now joined Mika's training sessions. He understood their reasoning. They had both sought out Mika's instruction to prepare for the Academy's entrance exam, which was only a few months away. Cynthia, with her innate talent, already possessed more than enough skill to pass the exam with ease. Her participation was a matter of refinement, not necessity. Lilith's situation, however, was different. Weiss recalled his initial plan for her to be his personal attendant, which meant she wouldn't have needed to take the test at all. But she had insisted on supporting him academically, so he had permitted her to take the exam alongside him. This meant that, technically, neither of them truly required the intense training. He realized with a jolt that if Cynthia, already guaranteed to pass, pushed herself even harder, she could become a far more formidable presence than she was in the original story he knew. As his thoughts raced, the four of them stood assembled in the clearing. Mika, Cynthia, and Lilith appeared ready, while Weiss clutched a training sword, a nervous energy radiating from him. Mika broke the silence, turning her gaze directly to him. She declared that the first fight would be between him and Cynthia. His stunned expression drew varied reactions. Lilith cheerfully encouraged him to do his best, while Cynthia playfully asked if he was already captivated by her. Mika cut in with a sharp warning, telling him not to hold back just because Cynthia was his fiancée. With a sharp command, she ordered them to face each other. Weiss and Cynthia took their positions on the field, practiced swords held at the ready. She then addressed Weiss directly, stating her trust that he understood her intent without needing the explicit command to begin. He could only stare back, utterly bewildered. He begins to question the command, but before he can finish his thought, Cynthia launches herself into the air, wooden sword raised high for a strike. The attack comes swiftly. He raises his own sword just in time, blocking the powerful downward slash with a sharp clang that kicks up dust from the training ground. From a distance, Mika and Lilith watch the engagement begin. As their blades remain locked, Mika's voice echoes in his mind, reminding him of her lesson. The most important thing in a fight is the first move. Cynthia offers a confident smile, and in the next instant, vanishes. He whirls around, shocked by her sudden disappearance. His eyes widen in alarm as he senses her reappearance. He pivots instantly, bringing his sword up to parry another strike, as Cynthia reappears directly behind him, her attack already in motion. The incredible speed is a product of her specialty, ice magic. He realizes her signature move is to infuse her legs with magic, allowing her to glide across the ground as if she were skating. Using this technique, she relentlessly attacks from his blind spots. He grunts with effort, forced to constantly adjust and defend against her fluid assault. But her aggressive lunges create an opening. As she commits to another strike, he deftly sidesteps and brings the flat of his blade down squarely on top of her head with a dull thud. The blow stops her cold. Cynthia clutches her head, whimpering an apology as Weiss looks on in a panic. Seeing the exchange, Mika's voice rings out, declaring that's enough. Mika calmly explains the outcome to a flustered Weiss. Because he swung his sword while Cynthia was moving at high speed, his intended light tap became a powerful counterattack. He stammers that he only meant to hit her lightly. Cynthia, however, is not focused on the pain. With tears of frustration welling in her eyes, she admits that while she has sparred many times before, this is the first time her attack has been dodged so easily. The feeling leaves her deeply frustrated. Still smarting from her defeat, Cynthia sits with a prominent bump on her head as Lilith applies healing magic. Mika thanks the maid for her help, to which Cynthia mutters a curt, "No prob," her expression still sour. Mika's attention then turns to Weiss, questioning how he managed to read Cynthia's high-speed movement. She remarks that his fiancée should have been incredibly fast, but Weiss simply looks back at her, nonplussed. She quickly dismisses her own line of questioning, deciding it's better to test if his victory was a mere fluke or a sign of true skill. To that end, she announces the next opponent for the young noble. He will fight Lilith. He reacts with disbelief, questioning if he is truly meant to fight again, especially against Lilith. From behind him, the maid chides him, telling him to stop whining and asking if he's already tired. Despite his hesitation, he takes his position opposite Lilith, both holding training swords. She formally states that she looks forward to their match, and he can only offer a stammered agreement as Mika and Cynthia look on. As he faces her, a wave of doubt washes over him. He initially thinks there's no way he can spar with Lilith, who is just a maid, or so he thought. But that thought is immediately challenged by his own memories. He has seen her actions time and time again, and they are anything but what one would expect from a simple maid, recalling her incredible agility. The memories crystallize into a grim certainty. He understands with chilling clarity that if he lets his guard down here, even for a moment, he will die. Before he can fully process the thought, Lilith moves. She unleashes a blindingly fast series of sword strikes, each one gouging the earth with explosive force. Weiss can only stare in stunned silence, his face a mask of terror, as Mika grits her teeth and Cynthia watches in disbelief. He barely manages to parry the relentless assault, his wooden sword clashing against hers. Each blow forces him back, his face contorted with effort as he struggles to keep up with her blinding speed. Lilith's face twists into a fierce grin as she realizes he can indeed follow her attacks. Watching from the side, Mika Aodas confirms to a stunned Cynthia that Weiss's ability to perceive high-speed movement was no mere accident. His mind races with confusion. He curses the situation, unable to reconcile this reality with his knowledge of the original story, where Lilith was merely his attendant with no significant role. He had never imagined she possessed such power. Cynthia watches with intense focus, analyzing her opponent. she realizes that despite having only recently started learning magic, Lilith's speed already surpasses her own, and she is also a skilled swordswoman. The pressure becomes too much. Weiss grits his teeth, knowing he will be defeated unless he takes the fight seriously. Above him, a dark magical energy begins to coalesce. He unleashes his spell, Dark Heal. A vast, shadowy magic circle expands across the arena floor, enveloping both him and Lilith within its arcane markings. Cynthia immediately recognizes the technique. She identifies it as Weiss's unique magic, a skill that simultaneously heals any allies inside the circle while inflicting continuous curse damage upon his foes. Her first instinct is that she must escape the circle's range immediately. But then, a new realization stops her. She understands a trade-off. To cast a spell of this magnitude, Weiss had to use both hands, forcing him to drop his sword. He is now completely unarmed and vulnerable. Across the arena, Lilith wastes no time. Seeing him on his hands and knees, his sword discarded, she sprints towards her defenseless master. She charged forward, a blur of motion. Weiss, however, stood his ground, a smirk forming on his face. He understood that even if he escaped the circle, as a close combat specialist, he would be vulnerable to her long-range magic from within. This, he realized, was his only chance. He would seize this opening. He met her descending blade not with magic, but with the simple cane he held. The impact sent a loud clang across the field, and to Lilith's shock, the force of the blow sent her reeling backward through the air. As she landed, he crouched, observing the shimmering hexagonal pattern of a barrier that now surrounded him. Her sword had bounced off it. He noted with satisfaction that she was, indeed, not holding back. He revealed the nature of his technique, an original spell called Absolute Barrier. It was a unique creation, combining the permanence of dark magic with the formidable protection of light magic. On top of that, he was employing another of his signature abilities, a magic known as Dark Eye. He was confident in his strategy. Even if his physical body couldn't match Lilith's incredible speed, the combination of his precognitive Dark Eye and the Absolute Barrier would allow him to defend against her assaults indefinitely, or at least for as long as his mana reserves last. Watching from the sidelines, Mika Aoda's expression grew tense. She looked towards the distant figure of Lilith, questioning aloud if this was the extent of her abilities. Her question was cut short by a sudden, urgent shout directed at Weiss, roaring for him to cancel his magic immediately. He turned, his expression shifting to one of confusion. He looked back towards his opponent and saw that Lilith was staggering, her posture unsteady as if overcome by dizziness. Before he could react, she collapsed, hitting the ground hard. He cried out her name in alarm. He stood over the aftermath of the duel as Cynthia Violetta, kneeling beside the unconscious Lilith, declared a complete defeat for him. Mika Aoda's, having rushed to help, reassured them that she had given Lilith an advanced potion and that she would be fine. Weiss, his concern evident, asked if she was truly all right. Her attention then shifted to Weiss, demanding to know what kind of magic he had used. Cynthia, while helping Lilith drink more, expressed her own shock, remarking that she never imagined someone like Lilith would be taken down in just a few seconds. He began to explain, naming the magic Dark Heal, and stating that it activates when an opponent enters the magic circle. Mika pressed further, asking if there were any other effects. He confirmed there were, listing the spell's devastating debuffs. It physically weakens the target, reduces their vigor and vitality, drains their mana, and severely lowers their physical defense, magic defense, attack speed, and movement speed. All of these effects, he explained, are inflicted on the target simultaneously. He concluded that since Lilith possessed a relatively small mana reserve, the rapid and total drain was what caused her to collapse. But that was only half of the spell's power. He then revealed the true nature of his ability, declaring that he is the exact opposite of his opponent. He can add all the stats he steals from the enemy to his own, strengthening himself. Furthermore, he explained with a confident smile, the more enemies there are within his magic circle, the stronger he becomes. He can even grant these same enhancements to anyone he recognizes as an ally. This revelation left his audience stunned. Mika, Cynthia, and another student stared at him, their expressions a mixture of shock and disbelief. In the darkness of their thoughts, they processed the terrifying potential of his ability. A chilling realization dawned on them as Weiss's eye widened, a manic intensity gleaming within it. He reeled internally, sweat beading on his face. Of all the moments, was this truly the right time to say something like that? His mind raced, justifying the urge. It was the ultimate line, a phrase everyone who reincarnated into another world dreamed of saying. He had always wanted to utter it, convincing himself it was perfectly fine. Before he could speak, however, Mika Aoda's cut through his thoughts with a direct challenge. Weiss sighed, placing a hand on his head as if weary. He asked what he had done wrong this time, but her response was simple and unwavering. Duel me, Weiss. A dark, intense aura flared around Mika. She remarked on how much he had grown, her words carrying a dangerous weight as Weiss watched her with a faint, knowing smile. She declared that it had been a long time since she'd felt so fired up. Slamming her fist down, Mika menacingly told Weiss that he would take responsibility and use his newfound power to calm her down. And so, his training began. Cynthia and Lilith joined in, witnessing the brutal sessions where Mika's power left craters in the earth, often with Weiss stuck headfirst inside. The days and months flew by. While Weiss endured Mika-sensei's Spartan training day after day, the misunderstanding between them remained completely unresolved, leaving him perpetually flustered in the presence of his companions. Finally, the grueling period of preparation came to an end. Standing before the grand, gated entrance of an imposing institution, Weiss, flanked by Cynthia and Lilith, announced it was time to proceed. They had arrived at the Noblesse Magic Academy for the entrance test. There, among the other applicants, stood Alan, the protagonist of the game. The time for their paths to finally cross had come. The sprawling grounds of the Noblesse Magic Academy, an institution of great prestige, lay quiet under the morning sky. Its grand central building stands as a testament to its importance. This academy, boasting the largest campus in the world, is the most sought-after educational institution in the kingdom. Today, its entrance test is being held, and the courtyard begins to fill with hopefuls. Amidst the crowd, a large, brutish man confronts a younger student, demanding to know why the bastard is staring at him. He accuses the young man, Alan, of staring. Alan stammers that he wasn't, explaining that he was simply struck by the man's impressive size. The man, however, takes this as mockery. His face contorts with rage as he questions if Alan is trying to mess with him. As he raises a hand to strike, his wrist is suddenly caught in an iron grip. A young man with light hair, Weiss Vincent, glares at him, stopping the assault cold. The large man cries out in pain, demanding to know who dares to interfere. As Weiss steps fully into view, a wave of recognition and fear ripples through the onlookers. They whisper his name in disbelief. The infamous, abusive noble, Weiss. The gossip spreads. Two female students observe that Weiss has shown up for the exam accompanied by two beautiful women. One identifies the girl with him as Lady Cynthia from the house Violetta, concluding that the rumors of their engagement must be true. His identity confirmed. The large man's face drains of all color. His aggression vanishes, replaced by pure terror, as he stammers the title he knows all too well. Villainous noble, Weiss Vincent Zama. He immediately throws himself to the ground, offering his deepest apologies and begging forgiveness for any perceived abuse. Weiss looks down at him with cold indifference, stating he'd never do something for someone like him, and simply tells him to get lost. As the terrified noble scrambles away, Weiss watches him go. He reflects internally that even though it's been a while since his reincarnation, his terrible reputation is clearly still going strong. His thoughts drift. 2 years have passed since he began his training. He resolves that he must be as friendly as possible to gradually change how people see him. He stood before the grand edifice of the Noblesse Magic Academy, the day of the entrance test having finally arrived. His purpose was clear. He had to defeat a certain man. As he contemplated this, the very person he had just saved turned to him, stammering his gratitude. Weiss's gaze sharpened. This was the man he had to overcome. The young man, seemingly oblivious to the intensity of the gaze upon him, extended a hand in greeting and introduced himself simply as Alan. He then recognized the noble, confirming his name was Weiss. With a bright, earnest expression, Alan wished him well, hoping they could both do their best in the test. Weiss offered no reply, his face a mask of stoicism. He remained outwardly impassive, but a quiet hope formed in his mind that they would both succeed in passing the exam. Alan's hand remained outstretched, an open invitation hanging in the air between them. The moment was broken by the sharp ring of a warning bell, as an academy official signaled the impending start of the examination. Cynthia gently reminded Weiss that the test was about to begin, while Alan's companion urged him to hurry as well. As they prepared to part ways, the young woman, Alan's childhood friend Cheryl Elias, turned to Weiss and offered her sincere thanks for helping Alan earlier. She and Alan then hurried away, with Cheryl asking about someone named Duke who had apparently gone on ahead. Left standing alone, Weiss's brow furrowed. A strange, unsettling feeling began to creep over him. He realized with a jolt that just moments ago, he had hesitated to reach for Alan's outstretched hand. He couldn't understand it. Why did the simple act of speaking with Alan fill him with such an unbearable sense of unease? The question echoed in his mind as he stood before the academy gates. He stood before the academy official, contemplating his strategy. It wasn't that he disliked Alan. His goal was simply to defeat him in the exam. After that, his plan had been to remain on friendly, yet distant terms. And yet, as an official announced the next stage, the practical combat test, he couldn't suppress a throbbing unease. The official instructed them to change into hand-me-down uniforms from former students, which would reduce damage from both magic and physical attacks. Dressed in the white and black combat attire, Weiss stood with Cynthia and Cheryl, poised for what was to come. As they waited, Alan's voice suddenly cut through the air, his words sharp with intent. He wanted to crush his opponent. His declaration ignited a horrifying realization within Weiss. The feeling wasn't just for Alan. A dark, overwhelming urge washed over him. He wanted to crush them all. He struggled to understand this sudden, violent impulse. In the background, an exam proctor explained the rules. Victory was achieved by knocking an opponent out of the ring or forcing a surrender. Weiss could only curse inwardly, wondering what was wrong with him. The proctor finished his explanation, asking if there were any questions and adding that he would intervene if things became too dangerous. In response, a large student raised his hand. The student, Duke, complained that his uniform was too small. The proctor, straining against his own tight collar, retorted that it was too late for complaints. Duke shot back that his was also too small and smelled bad, prompting the proctor to question aloud if they were really only 15. From across the yard, Alan shouted encouragement, telling Duke to tough it out for now. He promised that if he passed, he'd get a brand new uniform in his size, then urged him on, "Go crush it, Duke." Elsewhere, two female students observe the proceedings. One notes her surprise that the academy managed to prepare uniforms for every single examinee, remarking that it already makes her feel like she's been enrolled. Her companion, Cynthia Violetta, explains that this is only possible because a large number of former students ditch their uniforms and disappear. She confirms this grim reality with a knowing smile, adding that the high turnover rate just proves how hellish life becomes after entering the academy. In the background, Weiss Vincent overhears their conversation with a look of faint annoyance. Noblesse Academy is, after all, the most prestigious and brutal educational institution in the kingdom. The standards are absolute. Anyone who cannot keep up is expelled on the spot. The lessons are so intense that some students do not survive the ordeal. Many who leave discard their uniforms, never wanting to be reminded of their time there. Weiss considers this, recalling from the original story that gaining admission isn't actually the difficult part. He remembers that even a notoriously lazy character had managed to pass the entrance exam. His thoughts are interrupted as rain begins to fall, dripping down around him. He stands unflinching, his expression hardened. Inside the examination hall, an official calls for the next match. He announces examinee number 907, Alan, and his opponent, examinee number 909, Weiss Vincent. Alan looks up from the crowd, his name having been called. At the announcement, the two young men lock eyes across the hall. Alan's expression is one of slight surprise, while Weiss's is cold and unreadable. As they prepare, the rain intensifies into a downpour. An exam proctor points this out to the official, who declares that it can't be helped and orders everyone not currently in a match to move to the spectator seats. Despite the weather, the duel proceeds. In the center of a vast, rain-swept arena, Alan and Weiss face each other, swords drawn, as a referee stands between them, ready to begin. He stood opposite Alan on the grid arena floor, the referee positioned between them. A strange phenomenon was at play. While rain poured down around the platform, the dueling ground itself remained dry, a fact that caused a stir among the spectators. His opponent, Alan, paid the weather no mind. He grinned, expressing his surprise at facing Weiss in a mock battle and proposing they make it a good one. He then added a challenge, telling Weiss he had better not lose. He offered no verbal response, his expression remaining cold and unreadable. From the stands, a supporter's voice rang out, cheering for Weiss-sama to do his best. With the combatants ready, the referee raised his hand. He announced the start of the mock battle, and then roared the command to begin. The moment the word was given, Weiss lunged forward with blinding speed. Before Alan could fully react, Weiss was upon him, his sword swinging in a vicious downward arc that sent Alan reeling. As Alan fell, Weiss didn't press the attack. Instead, he stomped his foot, unleashing a wave of dark energy that pulsed across the arena floor from a technique named Dark Heel. The dark energy washed over Alan, who cried out in agony. In the stands, Cynthia and the other female students watched in horror, their faces etched with shock and concern. He turned his back on his opponent, who was now writhing on the ground. Weiss muttered in frustration, realizing the attack wasn't as effective as he'd intended. He continued to walk as a dark, menacing aura began to emanate from him. A twisted smile spread across his face as he acknowledged an uncontrollable, burning urge to crush his opponent. In the crowd, a muscular student suddenly clutched his own throat, feeling the oppressive pressure and realizing with a mix of horror and exhilaration that this was the source of his own strange excitement. The inner darkness within Weiss had been unleashed, a shadowy, grinning specter looming behind him. He questioned if this overwhelming sensation was because of Alan, who lay defeated and bloodied on the ground. The onlookers could only stare in stunned silence as the inner Weiss bared its fangs. After the entrance exams at the Grand Academy concluded, the results prompted an immediate and serious discussion among the staff. Inside a lavish office, the headmaster sat at a large, round table, looking down upon two individuals. He cut straight to the point, demanding to know what exactly they had done to Weiss. The two he addressed were Zevis Aldine, the Vincent family's butler, and Mika Avitas, the renowned S-rank adventurer. Both remained silent, contemplating the question. The headmaster then turned his attention to another staff member, musing aloud about the sheer improbability of Weiss Vincent's recent accomplishments. He marveled at the fact that the young man had managed to break all previous records in every single exam, a feat that left Weiss battered and bloodied, yet smirking in triumph. This man, Gills, the headmaster of the Noblesse Magic Academy, refocused on his two guests. He stated his intention to ask them a question directly, as they were the ones who had raised him. He leaned forward, his expression serious, and asked for their opinion of the boy, particularly one possessing such dangerous abilities. Before Zevis or Mika could answer, another man, an instructor, stepped forward. He addressed Headmaster Gills, respectfully asking if he might have a word. This instructor, Darius, offered a critical point of clarification. He stated that while Weiss's scores were indeed the highest in the Academy's history, he had not, technically, broken any records. The correction sparked a memory for Gills. He asked if Darius had forgotten last year's incoming student, recalling that Weiss had actually tied for first place with a certain girl, prompting Darius to inwardly comment on the headmaster's attention to detail. He questioned his staff about Weiss's training. Mika Aoda stated she had done nothing special, providing only some basic training. Zevis even added that he simply supported the boy with meals. The headmaster's eyes widened slightly in surprise. Zevis continued, specifying that he gave Weiss lots of protein. A brief memory surfaced of a battered but smiling Weiss. Darius, the instructor, looked on in disbelief, questioning the mention of protein. He specified the diet consisted of soy, dairy, and chicken tenders, with a side of milk. The explanation sent Darius into a rage. He slammed his fist down, roaring that it was impossible. He argued that Weiss had not only mastered the 4 major attributes, but also creation magic of both light and dark, something that couldn't be achieved with just food. While he fumed, Mika Aodas began chugging from a large wooden mug. She mumbled that she didn't know what to say, prompting an exasperated Darius to demand why she was drinking at that very moment. She quickly succumbed to the alcohol, slumping over the table. Zevis dryly commented that she brought it on herself, while Darius, still incensed, questioned who would give her alcohol in front of the headmaster. The headmaster calmly told Darius to keep his voice down, noting that Mika had always been this way. His hand tightened on the arm of his chair as he added that this situation was cruel to that boy. His words alluded to a recent, grim memory. In the pouring rain, Weiss knelt, supporting a gravely wounded Alan, whose sword lay on the ground beside him. He recalled the stark realization from that moment, his face grim under the downpour. Alan, he had nearly died. That memory fueled his current resolve. Standing in the rain, a cold smile played on Weiss's lips as he thought, all because of that brat Weiss. Back in the office, Darius raged at the unconscious Mika, reminding her that Alan was a student of exceptional talent whom he had trained, and questioning if she would spout such nonsense on a real battlefield. Darius grits his teeth in frustration as Mika leans toward him with a condescending smirk. She taunts him, calling his jealousy unsightly and accusing him of taking out his recent loss on them. His anger erupting, Darius points at Zevis, who kneels before the headmaster. He yells at Mika, blaming her for failing to guide Weiss properly, but Headmaster Gills silences them both with a sharp command to stop. From his position on the floor, Zevis calmly addresses the headmaster. He acknowledges the man's concerns regarding Weiss's enrollment, but assures him there is no need to worry. The headmaster, seated in his grand chair, considers this for a moment before declaring with certainty that Weiss would never use his power against those weaker than himself. Meanwhile, having left the confrontation behind, Weiss walks away from the building with Lilith and Cynthia. An unspoken thought hangs in the air. He has changed. Indeed, rather than being consumed by his own immense abilities, he now channels his energy into genuine effort. He is determined to become a man of strength and courage, flanked by Lilith and Cynthia, who hold their own acceptance letters. The trio smiles, clearly pleased as they pass through the gates, their future at the academy secured. They arrive before the impressive main building of the Noblesse Magic Academy. A voice calls out, gathering everyone's attention. Inside a lecture hall, a woman with dark hair and glasses stands before the newly enrolled students. She congratulates them on their enrollment and introduces herself as Chloe, the instructor who will be in charge of their class. Chloe's formal welcome is met with a range of expressions. Weiss observes with a cool, knowing smile, while Cynthia appears focused. Other students, including the muscular young man from the exam, look on with varying degrees of anticipation and nervousness. She welcomed them to the Noblesse Magic Academy. Weiss Vincent listened with a grim expression, flanked by Cynthia Violetta and Lilith Scarlet, who watched their new instructor with varying degrees of curiosity and apprehension. His gaze swept across the classroom, settling on the other students, particularly on Alan, who sat with his head bowed. He then looked up, a faint, confident smile playing on his lips as he met Weiss's stare. The sight of him brought back the memory of their entrance exam. Weiss recalled his own thoughts from that day. He had successfully defeated Alan. He remembered how he had been consumed by his own emotions, nearly beating Alan to death. But no matter how many times he knocked him down, Alan just kept getting back up. In fact, with each blow, Alan seemed to grow even stronger, his determination burning fiercely. Ultimately, Weiss had won by a landslide, but bringing Alan down had taken far longer than he had ever anticipated. Lost in this memory, Weiss reflected on how the fight had shown him what it truly meant to be a protagonist. A sharp snap of fingers from his instructor pulled him from his thoughts. She pointed out that a light was emanating from the back of each student's hand. Startled, Weiss looked down at his own, where a glowing sigil was now forming. The instructor held up a glowing token, explaining that the light represented the 1,000 points that had just been granted to each of them. She adjusts her glasses, explaining that these points are a measure that will follow them all the way until graduation. The students murmur in confusion, asking what these points are. Continuing her explanation, she writes 1,000 on a chalkboard. She states that, right now, everyone has 1,000 points, with one exception. Weiss Vincent. His gaze falls to the back of his hand, where the glowing sigil displays a total of 2,000. Their instructor's voice confirms that this amount was granted based on his test results. The revelation sends a wave of shock through the classroom as the other students chatter in disbelief, exclaiming, 2,000? Amidst the commotion, Weiss questions the meaning of this decision. He asks if the points are like grades and expresses concern that doubling his total is harsh on everyone else. He and the other students demand a proper explanation, wanting to know what the points are even for. Their instructor stands silently before them, considering their questions. After a moment's thought, she decides against a verbal explanation. Instead, she tells the class it will be easier for them all to understand through direct experience. With her decision made, she issues a command. Everyone is to grab a wooden sword and head to the training grounds. The students' faces register a mix of confusion and apprehension. Outside, beneath a vast cloud-filled sky, the stage for their first practical lesson is set. As the students stand assembled on the training grounds, she addresses them with a severe tone. She reminds them of her earlier congratulations on their enrollment, but adds a chilling clarification. She never promised they would all make it to graduation. The combat test is about to begin. She clarifies the stakes of this test, stating what many had likely already guessed. Any student whose points reach 0 will be expelled on the spot. The harsh reality of her words sends a jolt through the assembled students, one of whom gasps in disbelief. With the term set, she announces that for the day's test, they will all fight until someone's points are depleted. The students stand in tense silence, their expressions a mixture of shock and grim resolve. Weiss Vincent's gaze is particularly sharp, his jaw set in determination. Far from the academy grounds, in a sun-dappled clearing, Mika A. Odas presides over a scene of casual victory. Defeated men lie scattered around her, one pleading for his life at her feet. Holding a wooden mug, she reflects on how empty her days have become ever since Weiss left for his studies. A quiet decision forms in her mind. She decides she might as well kill some time by acquiring a teaching license at Noblesse Magic Academy. A faint, knowing smile touches her lips as she looks toward the distant institution, sensing that an interesting storm is brewing there. A young man with light hair approaches Weiss's group, confidently introducing himself as Louis Mysant. He recognizes Weiss and praises his performance in the mock battle, noting it was the highest score. While he speaks, Cynthia and the other female student beside her project an unwelcoming aura, silently warning him away. Louis was meant to be a bright, good-looking character with top-tier potential, destined to graduate at the top of his class. And yet, the current reality is starkly different. He now kneels in defeat on a dusty field, his promising future shattered. Standing over him, the instructor Chloe holds up a device displaying a large, unequivocal 0. She looks down at the defeated student and asks sternly if he failed to hear her judgment. Her voice rings out across the field, pronouncing the final verdict for Louis Mysant, expelled. The young man remains on his knees, bloodied and stunned, as Alan stands impassively behind him. From the sidelines, Weiss watches the scene, a bead of sweat tracing a path down his temple. The image of Louis's tear-streaked, defeated face is seared into his mind as he processes what just happened. He comes to a shocking realization. Louis was utterly crushed by Alan. The victor himself, though battered, wipes blood from his mouth with a look of grim determination. Later, the Academy's grand dining hall is sparsely populated. Weiss, Cynthia, and their companions sit at one long table, while Alan takes his meal alone at another, a significant distance away. Weiss stares down at his tray of food, his appetite gone. He clenches his fist in frustration, his mind racing as he wonders what he is supposed to do now. He reflects on his original strategy. He had been trying his best not to break the scenario, avoiding any unnecessary actions beyond defeating Alan in order to keep the original story as intact as possible. But now, his plans have been completely upended. The main heroine of the story, Cynthia Violetta, has somehow become his fiancée. As this devastating thought consumes him, she turns to her companion, blissfully unaware, and comments on how delicious the meal is. He reeled internally, sweat beading on his brow as the world spiraled into unforeseen chaos. Louis, who was meant to remain at the academy until graduation, had been expelled on the very first day. But even more unexpected than the external turmoil were the dark emotions of the original Weiss, now welling up from deep within him. This internal pressure had been building ever since he met Alan. The villain's persona was ordering him to become aggressive, not just toward Alan, but toward everyone around him. His hand tightened, bending a spoon with the force of his rising malice. He was supposed to play nice, to carefully and slowly gain their trust. Now, however, he felt an overwhelming desire to crush them all. He fought against the impulse, realizing that if he gave in to these emotions and began hurting people, he would end up hated, just as he was in the original story. As this thought consumed him, a calm voice from across the table cut through his inner turmoil, asking if he truly wanted to crush them all. The question came from Cynthia Violetta. With a serene expression, she declared that it sounded fine to her, if that was what he truly wanted. Her placid acceptance left him speechless. He couldn't understand why she wasn't reacting with alarm. Stunned, he returned his tray, managing only a quiet thank you to the chef for the meal. As he stood there in shock, she elaborated, reminding him that this was the Noblesse Magic Academy, implying such thoughts were not entirely out of place. She then looked at him with genuine concern, confessing that she had honestly been a little worried about him. Recalling a past, overly apologetic encounter, Cynthia concluded that he had always been far too kind. She continues, explaining that in a world where one must crush or be crushed, there is no room for mercy. After witnessing his performance in the test, She admits she has started to see him in a new light. As he stands there processing her words, a chef offers the young lady another bowl of pot tofu, but she politely declines. She tells Weiss that she feels the same way. In a harsh world of competition, they must be just as ruthless to stand their ground. Then, with a sudden, bright smile, she declares that in the end, what's most important is that he does what he wants, and she will support him no matter what. The chef's offer of more food echoes as Cynthia declines, but Weiss's mind drifts elsewhere. The name Lilith surfaces in his thoughts, a quiet, internal murmur. His attention snaps back to Cynthia as she places a hand on his shoulder. With a gentle but firm expression, she tells him that as her fiancé, he should possess the spirit to crush all his rivals. A faint blush colors his cheeks as he looks at both Cynthia and her companion. He quietly thanks them. He reflects on their conversation, a thoughtful smile playing on his lips. He admits that while he may not be able to accept this new perspective immediately, he is glad they talked, as it has helped him see things more clearly. At that moment, the other student offers a suggestion. Addressing him as Waisama, she presents a coin, proposing that if he truly cannot decide on a course of action, he could leave it to a coin toss. He takes the coin from her, a faint smile returning to his face. The idea resonates with him. Leaving the decision to fate is another path he can take. His thumb rests on the edge of the coin, ready to send it spinning. He muses internally that the original scenario is already in shambles, leaving the future completely uncertain. With a calm, resolved expression, he decides to stop overthinking. He will let this single coin decide everything. He felt the immense pressure of his decision, personified by the tearful chef who had prepared his meal, begging him to accept the path laid before him. The coin he had flipped soared through the air, a silver arc determining his future as Cynthia and the others watched from a distance. It landed and spun rapidly on the polished floor, the sound echoing the frantic beating in his heart as he and the chef stared, wide-eyed. The coin itself was special. On the front, a depiction of the kingdom's castle four heads, and on the back, a dragon symbolizing the strongest four tails. He had set the terms clearly in his mind. If heads came up, he would fight against his destructive impulses, avoid ruin, and make an effort to get along with Alan. But if tails came up, his eyes narrowed with a grim intensity, contemplating the alternative. Before the result could be seen, his foot shot out, trapping the spinning coin and sealing his fate beneath his shoe. Sometime later, in a hall at the academy, Alan approached him. Now clad in a white uniform, he held out the very same coin. Weiss, he began with a smile, you dropped this. He apologized for his late greeting, explaining that despite his previous injuries, he had successfully enrolled. He continued, his expression earnest and friendly. He was glad, he said, because he had wanted to see Weiss again. Weiss's face remained a cold mask. He thought to himself that Alan was wrong. It wasn't about seeing him again. The truth, the more accurate truth, was that he wanted to fight him again. He clasped his hands together, a thin, knowing smile spreading across his face as he comes to a decision. His resolve firm, he opens his hand to reveal the coin from the toss, its dragon insignia facing up. He declares aloud that he feels the same way as Alan. Later, in the academy's dining hall, Alan casually asks the chef for another serving of pot tofu, while Weiss watches him from a short distance away, his expression unreadable. The scene shifts to a large combat arena where a practical test is underway. With a single, powerful blast of energy from his outstretched hand, Weiss sends a female student, Chris Schlegel, hurtling through the air. From the sidelines, the instructor Chloe declares that it's enough. Defeated and sprawled on the ground amidst the remnants of a magic circle, Chris Schlegel is officially declared expelled. Another opponent, the muscular Gustav Gregorio, lets out a furious roar, his face contorted with effort as he prepares to attack. His charge is met with cold precision. Weiss strikes him squarely in the chest, the force of the blow sending him crashing into the nearby forest. Weiss calmly announces his expulsion as well. The results of his ruthless efficiency are clear. One after another, students are defeated and expelled. Karuna Kianich, Layman Kudavaretta, and several others whose names Weiss can't even bother to recall. Sometime later, Cynthia and Lilith catch up to him in the woods. Cynthia notes that he has managed to get 6 more rivals expelled today. Weiss, focused on the mission, immediately issues a command for them to flank the enemy and draw their attention, a directive Lilith quickly accepts. As they execute the maneuver, Weiss glances back with a sharp, intense grin. He thinks to himself that he owes Alan for this change. Thanks to him, he will no longer hesitate. He confronts Alan directly, a wide, predatory grin spreading across his face. With manic intensity, he declares his intent to crush his rival head-on and tear the entire scenario to pieces. Alan glares back, his teeth gritted in fury, a pair of scissors held tightly in his hand. Behind them, their respective teams watch the escalating tension. Cynthia and Lilith appear worried, while the student with the headband looks on in confusion. As the conflict brews on the exam grounds, the scene shifts to a quiet dormitory room elsewhere in the academy. Under the light of the moon, a lone female student sits hunched over on the top bunk, a picture of solitude and despair. The grand, imposing facade of the academy stands silent against the night sky. She clutches a circular device displaying the number 22, feeling she has reached her limit. A memory surfaces of her telling a tearful girl named Carta that she must keep going, even in her absence. Despite her own despair, She forces a smile and silently pleads for someone, anyone, to help. Her future is uncertain as she counts down the days until her inevitable expulsion from the academy. The match is declared over. A flag is raised, signaling victory for Team Weiss. He stands over a defeated Alan, who sits panting on the ground, his sword lying beside him. The two lock eyes, their expressions a mixture of exhaustion and fierce determination. His relentless advance has continued for a month since enrollment, a period during which 10 students have already dropped out. In a training yard, Weiss leaps through the air, his sword raised high, as another opponent cries out in defeat below him. He reflects on this with a confident smirk, sweat dripping down his face. Of those 10 dropouts, he was personally responsible for sending 7 of them packing. Following these exercises, students gather around a bulletin board, murmuring amongst themselves as they review the rankings for magic defense, magic tracking, and magic stealth training. A wave of disbelief spreads through the crowd. In every single field, one name sits at the top. Weiss Vincent ranked first. His sharp, focused eyes scan the classroom from his seat. This overwhelming performance provokes a classmate, who stands and points an accusing finger. He yells at Weiss, demanding to know if this is his second life. The student, identified as Duke Billion, Cheryl's childhood friend, continues his outburst. He demands to know what kind of training regimen Weiss followed to achieve such strength, recalling how in the previous day's flag battle, Weiss had slipped past the magic threads Cheryl set up, as if they were nothing. He recounts how Weiss flattened Alan in an instant and snatched the flag before anyone could react. That single test earned Weiss a staggering 5,700 points, securing him first place in the entire year by a landslide. Duke's voice booms across the room as he questions just how much virtue Weiss must have racked up in a previous life. Beside him, Cheryl quietly tells him to shut up, calling him noisy. In the aftermath of another mock battle, Alan looks downcast, apologizing to his companions for losing to Weiss yet again. Cheryl Elias tells him not to worry about it, and to simply focus on winning the next time. As she speaks, Weiss sits silently nearby, his expression unreadable, drawing a sharp, intense glare from Cheryl. He closes his eyes, a bead of sweat on his temple, trying to convince himself that the tension is fine. He reflects on his past self, recalling how the old Weiss used to vent his negative emotions through nasty, underhanded tactics, which ultimately led to his ruin and being hated by everyone. But the current him is different. He believes he has done nothing to feel guilty about, and sees no reason for anyone to hate him, choosing instead to let his emotions out through fair and square matches. This internal intensity, however, manifests as a menacing aura that Cheryl continues to stare at. Visibly trembling, Weiss pleads for her to stop looking at him that way. Later, in a separate room, the instructor Chloe addresses a student sitting at a desk. Weiss stands near the doorway, observing the tense meeting with a concerned look. She delivers a stern warning to the student, Carta, stating that if she fails to score any points in the next practical test, there will be consequences. She then asks if Carta understands the gravity of the situation. The young woman, identified as Carta Viol, looks up with wide, somber eyes. She quietly confirms that she understands and claims that she is fine. Chloe dismisses her claim curtly, stating that she never asked if she was fine. As Carta looks up, startled, Weiss's expression hardens with concern from his position by the door. He recalled the original story's events. In that timeline, Carta's best friend was meant to use her frustration as fuel, motivating her to strive for graduation. Carta, however, was expelled after the next exam. That was the established path of her side story. But now he had changed that path. Even though their match was fair, his victory had resulted in Chris Schlegel's expulsion. He had, in essence, caused Carta's best friend to be expelled. The realization weighed heavily on him. He pictured Carta leaving the academy grounds alone, destined to depart without achieving anything of note. As Carta sat alone, 2 other students approached her. One of them, with a mocking tone, asked what she planned to do for the upcoming exam. They continued to press her, reminding her with smug expressions that it was a tag battle, and questioning if she even had a partner to begin with. Carta's face tightened at the question. The student then twisted the knife, asking about her annoying bestie, rhetorically confirming that she had already been expelled. Their laughter filled the air as they openly mocked her. They found it hilarious that she had been so thoroughly thrashed by Weiss, wondering aloud how someone could possibly lose all their points in a single match. All the while, Weiss stood nearby, watching the scene unfold. Their taunts were cut short as they noticed him standing there. One of them gasped his name in shock, while Carta looked up from her seat, her eyes wide with surprise at his presence. In the aftermath of her confrontation with the other students, Weiss Vincent approached Carta Viol with an unexpected proposition, asking if she would team up with him for the next exam. The two stood on a high, rocky outcrop overlooking the sprawling academy grounds. She finally responded, her voice trembling with uncertainty as she asked why Weiss, would want to pair up with someone like her. She elaborated on her disbelief, pointing out that she was on the verge of expulsion while he was the top-ranked first year. Besides, she added, he had Cynthia. Her words caught in her throat as her eyes widened in sudden shock. Her terrified gaze was fixed on a dark silhouette that had appeared among the trees at the edge of the clearing. He noticed her abrupt change in demeanor and asked what was wrong, just as the source of her fear became clear. Cynthia Violetta, radiating an unnerving intensity. He, however, seemed completely unfazed, a confident smirk playing on his lips. He told Carta not to worry, asking if she was concerned about his fiancée. He assured her that Cynthia's greatest wish was for him to be the best in the academy, and that she would understand partnering with another was merely a strategy for victory. He even recalled Cynthia's own fierce words, telling him to have the spirit to defeat everyone. His words offered little comfort. No, Carta stammered, still reeling from the palpable bloodlust she had felt moments before. Weiss called her name sharply, demanding her attention. He looked away from her, his expression hardening as he delivered his final, cold clarification. He was not trying to help her, he stated, nor did he have the time or energy to feel sorry for every student facing expulsion. He continued his explanation, stating that it would be a real waste if Carta were to be expelled. Carta, meanwhile, was still reeling from Cynthia's sudden appearance and disappearance, questioning if she had imagined the entire encounter. From a distance, he praised her, remarking that her flying magic is truly impressive. He elaborated that even skilled mages find it difficult to handle, and he thought it would be a waste for someone with her level of control to go unnoticed. This was why he figured that teaming up with her would be the most efficient option for the next exam. Hidden behind a tree, Carta confirmed to herself that Cynthia was indeed there. Cynthia's voice then cut in, confirming that Weiss's interest was due to Carta's unique skill. Carta turned to find Cynthia right beside her, one hand pressed against the tree with a confident smile. The sudden proximity made Carta flinch, a bead of sweat forming on her cheek. With a knowing look, Cynthia complimented Carta's impressive sensing ability. She mused that Carta was able to pick up on faint traces of magic that even Weiss couldn't detect, questioning if her perception might be even sharper than his dark eye skill. She then pointed out a flaw in Carta's awareness. Despite her keen senses, she had failed to notice Lilith, a master of assassination techniques. The revelation caused Carta to let out a startled cry. Cynthia continued her explanation, revealing that the upcoming tag battle is a joint exam involving students from all 3 school years. She clarified that Weiss has devised a winning strategy that relies on partnering with someone possessing a special ability. Carta, instead of teaming with powerful fighters like herself or Weiss, who can already hold their own against 2nd and 3rd-year students. She then revealed her own plans, announcing that she would be pairing up with Lilith. With a confident smile, she encouraged a stunned Carta to take on the exam with Weiss. The suggestion sent a wave of panic through Carta. Cynthia's words echoed menacingly in her mind as the pressure began to mount. Meanwhile, Weiss stood alone on a desolate training ground, his decision made. He declared that he would pair up with Carta, and, with little time left before the exam, their special training would begin immediately. He stood before her, his expression intense and unwavering. Carta, clutching her ornate staff, could only look up at him, the weight of the situation pressing down on her. And just like that, in preparation for the upcoming exam, the special training began. The pressure on Carta was immense, bringing tears to her eyes even as she forced a terrified smile. As Weiss Vincent and Carta Viola walk along a wooded path, Weiss reflects on his training. He muses about flying magic, stating that while it's a tricky skill to master, he feels he's finally starting to get the hang of it. Carta, a known user of flying magic, glances at him with a knowing, gentle smile. She playfully refutes his confidence, reminding him that he couldn't even manage to stay airborne for 2 seconds. As they continue toward a large building in the distance, Weiss concedes her point. He explains that since the plan for the upcoming exam involves him flying with her, there isn't a strict necessity for him to learn it himself right now. He turns his head slightly, a determined glint in his eyes. He adds, however, that he saw this as a rare opportunity and decided he wanted to learn it regardless. He elaborates on his reasoning, stating that any magic can become a powerful weapon depending on how it's used, so there's no harm in knowing it. He then points out that he conveniently has a flying magic teacher, Carta, right beside him. She looks at him, her expression unreadable. He bows his head slightly in apology, acknowledging that he's dragging her into something unrelated to the exam. He simply thought that since she was an expert, she might be able to teach him a little. Lifting his gaze, his expression becomes firm and resolute. He makes a solemn promise. In return for her help, he will ensure she is not expelled during tomorrow's exam. Building on that vow, he then asks if she would be willing to continue helping him train with flying magic, even after the exam is over. Carta listens silently, taking in the weight of his words. A quiet chuckle escapes her as she brings a hand to her lips. A realization dawns on her. The rumor she's heard about him must be completely wrong. Her expression softens into a warm, genuine smile. She had no idea that Weiss was such a diligent hard worker. With newfound respect, she readily agrees to his request, addressing him by name. She looks at Weiss, her ornate staff held firmly in her hand, and formally accepts his proposition. If he's truly all right with her as his tutor, she declares, then she would be happy to help. As he listens, a faint smile on his face, she internally contrasts his behavior with his reputation. Everyone claims he is a lazy, disgraceful noble, but she now knows he is nothing of the sort. Walking together across the academy grounds, her admiration for him grows. She realizes she wants to be like him, a diligent hard worker, always eager to learn and explore new things. Unseen by the pair, instructor Chloe watches them from a high window inside the main building, her attention focused squarely on Weiss Vincent. Elsewhere, within a grand office, Headmaster Gills of the Noblesse Magic Academy pores over a document. He remarks to himself that the score recorded on the page is hard to believe for an underclassman. Chloe, standing before his desk, confirms his assessment. She adds that, on top of the high score, Weiss was single-handedly responsible for taking down more than half of the students who were expelled. The discussion of the recent exam standouts is not limited to the headmaster's office. Elsewhere, the student Cheryl Elias remarks that while Weiss is certainly impressive, the rest of this year's students are also an exceptional bunch. Back in the office, Chloe clarifies her report. Despite Weiss's performance, she states that the one who surprised her the most was Alan, the apprentice of instructor Darius. She recalls his tenacity, explaining how he repeatedly rose from the brink of failure. Each time he was knocked down, he came back even stronger. Her thoughts drift to an empty training ground as she concludes her report. Beyond Weiss and Alan, she reveals, there were two other students who truly caught her off guard. In a flurry of motion and sparks, Lilith and Cynthia clash with their blades. Both are bruised and bloodied, their faces set with fierce determination as they trade blows in a brutal training duel. An unseen observer notes their astonishing growth. Their current pace and skill would have been utterly unimaginable when they first enrolled at the academy. They have been training as if their very lives were on the line, eschewing reinforced training gear and engaging in dangerous combat with real swords instead of wooden ones. This risky, life-or-death training regimen is precisely what has forged them into incredibly strong warriors, as Cynthia lands a decisive blow that sends Lilith reeling. The duel concludes with both combatants collapsing to the ground, utterly spent and gasping for air after pushing themselves to their absolute limits. Elsewhere, another pair of students demonstrates a different kind of strength. A young woman with long, dark hair kneels, her hands glowing as she casts a healing spell on her injured companion. Back at the training ground, Cynthia looks at her rival with genuine admiration, remarking that Lilith is quite something. Lilith, however, deflects the compliment, insisting that Cynthia is the truly impressive one. Her face smeared with blood and dirt, Lilith's gaze hardens with resolve. She quietly vows to herself and to Cynthia that she's going to get even stronger. The source of this drive is revealed. Cynthia, standing beside Weiss, explains her ambition. She wants to become a strong and proud individual, able to stand by his side as an equal, not just someone tagging along. Hearing this, Lilith's expression firms. She shares the same core motivation, declaring that she, too, wants to grow stronger for Weiss-sama. She kneels over the defeated Cynthia, declaring her resolve to become much stronger so that she can be someone Weiss can rely on when he is in danger. Cynthia smiles warmly, telling Lilith that she is already strong enough. Lilith humbly disagrees, insisting she is not nearly as powerful as Cynthia. Their expressions shift to ones of cunning agreement. They acknowledge that their immediate, shared goal is to drag the girl named Carta away from Weiss's side. Elsewhere, as the sun rises over the mountains, Carta Viol shivers uncontrollably, wondering why she suddenly feels a chill. A woman with glasses looks on, perplexed. Time passes, and the day of the exam arrives. Crowds of students gather in a vast courtyard, assembled before a large, intricate magical circle inscribed on the stone ground. A student named Duke Billion raises a fist, announcing that it's time to decide their pairings by leaving it to fate with a game of rock, paper, scissors. He loudly lays out the terms for Alan and Cheryl. The loser must pair with a random stranger, and it will be decided in one shot with no hard feelings. Alan agrees enthusiastically while Cheryl sighs, remarking that Duke is always making a fuss. The trio prepares to play, shouting the start of the chant. In the background, Weiss and Carta are already standing together as a pair. An unseen proctor's voice announces that the next pair, Weiss and Carta, will be transported to Mount Gariel. A countdown from 3 begins. Instantly, they materialize in a dense forest. Weiss confirms their strategy. They will proceed as planned, hunting down the upperclassmen with the highest points. An announcer's voice echoes across the vast, forested mountain range. It confirms that all students have been successfully transported to their designated starting points for the exam. The voice continues, officially commencing the joint 3-year event. Carta Viol appears apprehensive, while beside her, Weiss Vincent wears a confident smirk. Elsewhere, Cynthia Violetta observes the proceedings with a focused gaze. With the declaration that the tag survival test has begun, various pairs of students brace for the challenge. Alan and Cheryl Elias stand ready, as do Duke Billion and his partner, among other determined-looking teams. Cynthia's sharp, calculating gaze sweeps over the participants. Far from the tense atmosphere of the exam, Mika Aodas lounges in a hammock on a sun-drenched beach. Below her, the thugs who once accosted her are being brutally disciplined. One is gagged and serves as her footrest while others lie defeated in the sand. Suddenly, her relaxed expression sharpens as a memory surfaces. She remembers her plan with a jolt of realization. That's right, she was going to get her teaching license for the Noblesse Magic Academy. The thought energizes her, a new purpose decided upon in an instant. A large white bird with piercing red eyes lets out a sharp cry, its voice heralding the start of the 3rd joint tag team event. The announcement echoes through a dense forest where Weiss Vincent stands beside his partner, a dark-haired student holding a staff. Weiss remarks with anticipation that the main event, the survival competition, is finally started. The key participants are reminded of the stakes. They must cooperate with their partners and show their true strength. Among them are Alan, Weiss, Cynthia, Cheryl, and a determined-looking girl with pink hair holding an ornate staff. The competition unfolds across a vast and challenging wilderness of dense forests and towering mountains. Almost immediately, combat erupts. A student with spiky hair screams as electricity arcs across his body, while Alan walks past him, his sword already drawn and his work done. He glances back as the convulsing student collapses. With a cold, detached expression, Alan asks what's wrong. High above the forest floor, the referee bird lets out another cry, observing the outcome of the swift battle. Its cry serves as an official declaration. Underclassmen number 31, Ariel, and number 27, Vivid, are out of combat. Below, Alan stands over their two defeated forms. With their elimination confirmed, the bodies of the two students begin to glow, dematerializing as they are sent back to the Noblesse Magic Academy. As they vanish, another student with a wild grin approaches, chuckling softly. Alan turns to face this new challenger, his expression unreadable. Elsewhere in the competition grounds, two upperclassmen observe the proceedings. One, a young man with a dark bowl cut and a sinister grin, mocks the underclassmen, remarking on how easily they fell for a simple trap. His companion, who has reddish hair and a bandage on his nose, advises against underestimating them, mentioning a rumor about an exceptionally talented student who enrolled this year. The bowl-cut student dismisses the rumor with a scoff. The red-haired student continues, noting that all the well-known participants from their own year have already been eliminated, concluding they were all just titles without any real substance. He then asks his partner for the name of the rumored underclassman. After a moment of thought, the bowl-cut student confirms the name, Weiss. At that very moment, they witness Weiss in combat. With a confident smirk, he effortlessly defeats two opponents in a forest clearing, much to the intrigue of the red-haired observer. The bowl-cut student formally announces the elimination of middle-classman number 10, Liddy. Weiss unleashes a crescent-shaped blast of energy from his hand, catching his foe off guard. The red-haired student's face twists in shock at the sudden display of power. The attack sends the other combatant flying, leaving him incapacitated on the ground. Stunned, the red-haired student looks around frantically, demanding to know where Weiss even came from. As Weiss lands, the upperclassman's eyes lock onto a star insignia on his shoulder, a mark of excellent achievement. He realizes with a start that Weiss cast a high-density fire spell without an incantation. Acknowledging his opponent's true strength, he resolves not to hold back any longer. He surges forward, leaping over a translucent barrier of energy, an unnatural wall, that Weiss has summoned to block his path. With his hand aimed directly at his target, the red-haired student unleashes his own power, roaring a furious command. Burn to ashes, Weiss. His massive fire spell narrowly misses its target. To the upperclassman's astonishment, Weiss Vincent dashes sideways in midair, completely evading the blast. He watches the maneuver, utterly bewildered, wondering aloud if Weiss had truly just changed his direction while airborne. The disbelief twists into a panicked shout as he realizes it's true. Weiss has indeed altered his trajectory and is now diving straight towards him, sword poised to strike. The dive culminates in a sharp, sliding stop on the ground. As the upperclassman is violently thrown back by an unseen force, Weiss calmly names his technique, Unnatural Wall. As his opponent falls, Weiss's mind drifts to the origin of this power. He recalls his inability to master flight magic, which led him to instead learn a new, unconventional technique. He remembers the moment of its conception, resting a hand against the invisible barrier he had created. He decided to name it Unnatural Wall. The principle was simple. He could manifest the wall in midair and use it as a solid foothold to push off from, just as he had done moments ago. He also recalls its limitations. The wall would only maintain its form for a brief moment after he kicked off it. Furthermore, the farther from the ground it was created, the more magic it consumed, making true high-altitude flight impossible. But that was more than enough. A faint smile crosses Weiss's lips as he reflects on his flying magic lessons. They had greatly expanded his range of tactics, allowing him to overcome opponents who now lay defeated. The technique had proven its worth against another challenger. The student with the mohawk had lunged, his sword aimed true, only for the strike to be stopped dead by the shimmering, hexagonal barrier of the unnatural wall. Before he could register his victory, another combatant, a student with a mohawk, cried out in alarm. A brilliant projectile of light shot down from the sky, aimed directly at him. The blast of light struck with concussive force, sending the mohawked student flying backward. Weiss could only watch, startled by the sudden, powerful attack that sent his opponent tumbling to the ground. The student, identified as upperclassman number 17, Mahit, was declared out of combat. Looking up, Weiss saw the source of the attack, a young woman floating in the air who apologized directly to him. She, the flying mage girl Cardaviol, explained her actions. She had tried to signal that another group was approaching, but when Weiss didn't seem to notice, she took matters into her own hands and attacked. He understood, thanking Carda for her help and acknowledging her skill in taking down an opponent in a single blow. He then wondered aloud about the barrier that had just activated automatically. She, in turn, analyzed his techniques. From what she had observed, his defensive magic was a combination of darkness and light. She surmised that while all his techniques were high performance, their efficiency was poor, limiting how many times he could use them. Their conversation was interrupted by a new voice. A smug-looking student with glasses approached, identifying Weiss as the top-ranked underclassman. He warned Weiss not to get cocky, just for defeating trash, and declared that a victory against his own database attack was 100% impossible. He then dramatically removed his glasses, tossing them to the ground as he crouched into a combat stance, letting out a triumphant laugh. He revealed his secret with a manic grin. When he takes off his glasses, his combat ability increases by 3.14 times, or to be more precise, by the irrational number pi. Veins bulged on his face as he powered up. In the face of this bizarre power-up, Weiss dropped to one knee, his sword resting on the ground before him. As his opponent loomed over him, he began to cast a spell, his voice echoing with two words, Dark Heal. He watched as his opponent, Archimedes, was suddenly enveloped in a dark, draining aura. The upperclassman cried out in confusion, feeling his strength rapidly fading away. Weiss, sweating from the effort, recognized the effect of his technique, a form of information-based attack his foe couldn't comprehend. Capitalizing on the confusion, Weiss admonished him for coming unprepared. With a roar that this outcome was never in his opponent's data, he leaped forward, sword raised high for a finishing blow. His blade struck true, incapacitating the student. A formal announcement confirmed it. Upperclassman number 96, Archimedes, was out of combat. Weiss let out a quiet affirmation of his victory. With the battle won, he turned to Carta, a wild, triumphant grin spreading across his face. Holding up a device displaying their new point total of 7,014, he declared that at this pace, they would strip the points from every careless senior. She checked her own device, her eyes widening in shock. Her personal score had skyrocketed from a mere 22 to 1,336. Having secured their victory in a massive number of points, the pair continued their trek across the desolate, rocky landscape. Meanwhile, in another part of the testing grounds, Cheryl Elias greeted Alan, confirming that he and the girl beside him were allies. From a short distance, Cynthia Violetta and Lilith Scarlet watched them intently. Cynthia stepped forward with a confident smile, directly challenging Cheryl's group to a match. With limitless potential and growth that defied the very parameters of the contest, Cynthia and Lilith were making their move. High above the forest canopy, a large white bird is struck mid-flight by an unseen projectile. The source of the attack, Weiss Vincent, lands with precision, his sword still extended. On the ground behind him lies a defeated opponent as an announcement declares that first-year student number 8, Myphis, is unable to continue. He stands over the fallen student in a forest clearing. Perched on a branch high above, Carta Viol observes the outcome. She notes that the second and third-year students are no longer anywhere to be found. Weiss, his expression tense, confirms her observation, stating they've completely stopped appearing. Carta speculates that it's because the magic birds keep repeatedly announcing the locations of the knocked-out students, giving away their positions. With a powerful leap, Weiss bounds through the treetops, carrying Carta on his back. He declares that it doesn't matter where their opponents run. He tells her to forget about the first years and to focus their hunt on the second and third years instead. Her eyes suddenly widen with intense focus. She has found a target. Weiss's decision is reaffirmed in his mind. The reason he teamed up with Carta was precisely for her special abilities. She soared through the sky alongside Weiss, her mastery of flying magic on full display, a skill that even veteran mages often struggle to control. This, combined with her extraordinary detection ability, made their partnership lethal. Deep within the forest below, Weiss crouched, ready to act on the information she provided. From her vantage point, she relayed her assessment, stating her belief that their target was a third-year student. She noted that they were exceptionally skilled at concealing their magical presence. Hearing this, Weiss gave a confident smile and announced he was going. With a simple confirmation from Carta, he leaped from his perch and dove towards the forest floor. He knew the environment gave him a distinct advantage. In a dense forest, attacks from directly overhead were difficult to guard against. Moreover, with the numerous magic birds flying about, it was even harder for anyone below to recognize his descending form as human. His blade struck true. The unsuspecting student cried out as the blow landed with a sharp crack, the surprise attack utterly overwhelming them. The target was instantly eliminated, enveloped in a flash of light. Weiss reflected that surprise attacks in this world were incredibly potent, as people rarely used magic to protect themselves when caught unaware. A strike from a blind spot was almost always a one-shot victory. Rejoining Carta, he listened as she recalled Milk Sensei's constant advice about the importance of taking the first move. She then asked how much time they had left, and Weiss confirmed it was about 20 minutes. Sensing his agitation, Carta tried to calm him down. She pointed to their score of 2,070, insisting they had earned enough points and there was no need to take any more risks. Weiss, however, was frantic, demanding that she find the third-year students immediately. His eyes widened with a desperate intensity. He shouted that their current score was nowhere near enough, his ambition overriding all caution. His eyes burn with intensity as he explains the Academy's points system to Carta. He stresses that the more points a student earns, the greater the rewards and special privileges they receive. He then details the specific privileges for each rank. C rank, his current standing, grants a private room for 5,000 points. B rank offers a luxurious private room at 10,000 points. A rank provides a full tuition waiver for 15,000 points. The highest, S rank, requires 20,000 points and allows a student to skip grades and graduate early. Anyone below 5,000 points must stay in a shared room. This competitive system has a clear effect on the student population. As first-year students advance to the second and third grades, their numbers drop significantly, while the proportion of B and A rank students grows. Despite this, a significant milestone remains untouched. In the Academy's entire, long history, not a single student has ever managed to achieve the legendary S rank. Hearing this, Carda's expression shifts to one of alarm. She asks him, her voice laced with disbelief, if he is truly aiming for S rank by hunting down upperclassmen. Y simply offers a confident smirk in return. His composure suddenly shatters. He erupts with a frantic shout, his face a mask of comic desperation, declaring that she is mistaken. What he's aiming for, he yells, is B rank. He clarifies that while reaching S rank is his ultimate goal for the future, it is not what's important at this moment. With wide, manic eyes, he asks if she is aware of the privileges that come with the B rank private room. Before she can respond, he reveals the true prize he seeks. The B rank room comes with all-you-can-eat premium fruits delivered by room service. Carda is left utterly stunned that this is his motivation. His thoughts drift back to a time about a year ago. He recalls a period of grueling, Spartan training, during which his only solace was the desserts served after his meals, often a platter of exquisitely cut fruit. But that simple joy did not last. As the training intensified, he gradually lost his ability to taste fruit. He remembers a day when his butler, Zevis, presented a special dish, and all he could do was stare at it, wondering what the point of eating it was. He finishes his story, the image of his ultimate goal crystal clear in his mind. The super premium mellow melon. He recalls that day vividly. The exquisite taste of that very rare mellow melon was so profound that it single-handedly restored the sense of taste he had lost. This delicacy is available through the all-you-can-eat room service exclusive to B-rank students. With a roar of determination, he declares that to experience that flavor once more, he planned to seize all the points he could from the upperclassmen during this very exam. His intense expression suddenly softens into one of pleading vulnerability. He tells Carda that this is why he needs her cooperation until the very end, promising that since she's helping him, he will of course help her too. Flustered, she agrees. As they fly onward, she processes his confession. She had known Weiss was unusually motivated for this exam, but she never would have guessed it was all because of food. A realization dawns on her. Her own family actually grows mellow melons. She blushes, wondering what would happen if she told him. Would he come over for a visit? Her train of thought is abruptly shattered. A deep rumbling sound echoes from a distance. Both she and Weiss turn in alarm as a colossal pillar of dark, chaotic energy erupts from the forest below, surging violently into the sky. He stares intently at the disturbance, his voice grim. Carda, he begins, even I can tell. Her eyes widen in sheer terror as she finishes his thought. That thing over there is a true monster. She realizes with dread that facing such a person is simply impossible. She shouts that they need to get out of there quickly, but her companion seems distracted. A massive, ornate, key-like structure crashes into the forest below them. He ignores her plea, dropping from the sky and landing with a heavy thud on the forest floor. He immediately assumes a low, ready stance, sword in hand. A wide, eager grin spreads across his face as he realizes the potential of this new development. This just got interesting, he thinks, before launching himself forward at full speed. From above, Carda can only watch in shock, questioning his decision to charge straight into the unknown. He skids to a halt at the edge of a sunlit clearing. Seated serenely on a tree stump, bathed in a column of light, is a young woman with exceptionally long, light-colored hair. Small birds flutter around her feet, completely at ease in her presence. Her eyes, partially hidden by her hair, fix upon him. A faint, knowing smile touches her lips as she speaks, her voice calm. You must be the rumored Weiss Vincent Cohen. She is Eva Everill, a second-year student. A small bird lands gently on her outstretched finger as she regards him with an unreadable expression. His excitement is palpable. He swings his sword forward with a whoosh, pointing it directly at her. He declares it an honor to meet Eva Everill Senpai and, without hesitation, challenges her to a match. A soft chuckle escapes her lips. Her smile widens, revealing a hint of dark amusement. She is delighted, she says, to receive such an invitation from the famous Weiss Cohen. Her reputation is legendary. As she stands, her silhouette is framed by an aura of immense power. Eva Everill is, without question, the strongest student in the entire academy. He knows this better than anyone. In the world he remembers, she was known by other titles. The true last boss, an official cheater. She was a game-breaking bug, an entity whose power defied all logic. He recalled the history of his opponent. Because of her overwhelming strength, Eva Everill had grown bored of academy life. In the original story, she was known as the true last boss. He remembered that after this exam, she was fated to leave the academy on her own. She was the strongest character, one that no player had ever managed to defeat. His hand tightened on the hilt of his sword. This realization solidified his resolve. With only 10 minutes remaining, he knew that if he was ever going to fight her, it had to be now. He would give it everything he had to defeat her and end this exam. Across from him, Eva watched with a confident smirk. With a manic grin, he roared his intent to go all out, lunging forward with his sword raised high. As he charged, a powerful shockwave from their impending clash blasted through the nearby forest where his companions watched. Alan cried out Cheryl's name in alarm. He turned to Cynthia and Cheryl, his expression grim. He told them they were the only ones left and pleaded with them not to take this fight personally. Cynthia, however, was resolute. She told Alan to prepare himself, declaring that if they could defeat an opponent that even Weiss couldn't completely beat, then Weiss would finally have to acknowledge their strength. Her words triggered a violent reaction in Alan. His body tensed, and his face contorted in a pained grimace as a powerful energy began to surge around him. Cynthia and Cheryl stared in shock, realizing that Alan was awakening. The ground smolders and cracks, the air thick with heat as the final confrontation concludes. Across the ravaged terrain, Weiss Vincent and Eva Everell face each other, the battle's intensity still hanging between them. A declaration rings out. The exam is over. He pants, sweat beading on his brow, a stark contrast to her composed demeanor. Eva observes that he was clearly holding back, a fact he begrudgingly admits, stating he never expected to be pushed into using magic. She offers a simple assessment. He's not bad, and notes that their time is up. A strained laugh escapes Weiss's lips. He can only stare, a single thought echoing in his mind as he takes in the sight of his opponent. Eva Everell, so strong. His mind races, cataloging the powerful techniques he deployed: absolute barrier, dark eye, dark heel. He had played every card he possessed, and yet not a single one had worked on her. The remnants of his shattered defenses lay scattered at her feet, a testament to her overwhelming power. He lowers his gaze, a profound sense of defeat washing over him. He had been growing bored of this academy, feeling unchallenged. His initial plan had been to leave after this exam, to move on from this place. But now, his expression hardens, a new fire igniting in his eyes. Across the chasm, Eva's lips curve into a knowing smile. She tilts her head, her voice carrying across the scorched earth as she informs him that she has taken a liking to him. A wide, almost feral grin spreads across his face in response. He decides then and there that he will stick around this academy for a while longer. As his decision solidifies, Carta Viole soars through the sky on her staff, her voice amplifying as she makes a formal announcement to all remaining participants. Following the duel, Eva Everell calmly informs a sweating but resolute Weiss Vincent that he will be sent back to the Noblesse Magic Academy. With a soft whoosh of displaced air, the combatants vanish, leaving the fractured dueling ground empty and silent. Just like that, it was over. A memory surfaces, a recollection of a major mistake made once in the past. The thought belongs to Carta Viole, who clutches her staff with a bright, relieved expression. She recalls that Eva had stayed at the academy, and she herself had avoided expulsion. Meanwhile, on a field filled with the indistinct forms of other students, Cynthia Violetta and Lilith Scarlet walk together amidst the chatter, observed from a distance by Weiss. His eyes widen in disbelief as he sees them. Both appear battered and defeated, with Cynthia leaning on Lilith for support. He is stunned, wondering who on earth could have possibly defeated them. As they walk, Cynthia's face is etched with pain and regret. With her eyes squeezed shut, she begins to apologize to Lilith. She confesses that she got too caught up in the idea that she had grown stronger, and their current state is the direct result of her hubris. Her apology continues as she laments that, on top of everything, she dragged Lilith into the ordeal and caused her to suffer as well. Lilith, however, gently rejects the apology, insisting that she should be the one apologizing. She blames her own weakness for tarnishing Cynthia's battle record. From afar, Weiss watches their exchange, his expression unreadable. He listens as Eva, her back still turned to him, quietly admits that she wanted to win. Her words hang in the air as she specifies her desire was to win against Alan. The revelation stuns Weiss, his eyes widening in disbelief. His gaze shifts across the field, past the defeated Cynthia and Lilith, to where Alan now kneels. Alan speaks with an earnest intensity, his face smudged with dirt from the battle. Cynthia listens, a faint, tired smile on her lips despite her defeat. A sudden realization seems to strike Alan, his eyes widening as he senses Weiss's stare from across the clearing. Weiss, in turn, looks equally startled. The two rivals lock gazes. Alan's expression is one of grim determination, while a confident, almost challenging smirk spreads across Weiss's face. And with that silent exchange, the joint 3-year tag team exam comes to a close. The victors and the vanquished stand on the same field, separated only by the outcome of their battles. In the days that followed, the students returned to the familiar routine of their academy life. For Weiss, the victory brought tangible rewards. Soon after the exam, he was promoted to B rank, a status that afforded him a life of considerable luxury. It seemed as though these peaceful days would continue. Yet for a time, the daily routine of competing against lower-ranked students began to feel unsatisfying, the constant, easy victories offering no real challenge. She was seated in the classroom when the instructor, Chloe, began to speak. As the door rattled, she announced her intention to introduce a guest instructor, only to be interrupted by a polite greeting from the doorway. Chloe seemed flustered by the sudden appearance. As the guest entered, the students reacted with a mixture of awe and shock. Duke Billion's fist trembled as he admired her, while Cynthia Violetta and Eva Everell gasped in disbelief. Weiss, however, was utterly stunned, his eyes wide with shock. His face broke out in a cold sweat. A powerful, overwhelming sensation washed over him as he stared at the newcomer. He felt a visceral change take hold, realizing with dawning horror that his vision was gradually turning red. For Weiss Vincent, the nightmare returns. Standing before him is the imposing figure of Mika Iotas, her expression cold and unyielding, a stark reminder of a past terror he cannot escape. She stands at the front of a classroom, addressing the assembled students. With a tone devoid of warmth, she introduces herself as Milk Avitas, announcing that she will be in charge of their combat training starting today. Her gaze sweeps across the room as she asks if there are any questions. Weiss, meanwhile, is paralyzed with fear, panting heavily, unable to speak. Just then, a single hand shoots up into the air with confidence. The hand belongs to Duke Billion. With a bright and curious expression, he asks why Milk Sensei ended up coming to the academy as a substitute instructor. Seeing this, Weiss feels a wave of relief wash over him. He silently thanks Duke for asking the very question he was too terrified to voice himself. Mika's face darkens, her eyes shadowed with annoyance. She repeats the question to herself, as if questioning why she is there at all. Her patience snaps. "Shut up," she commands coldly, her voice cutting through the room. "Don't ask me such pointless questions." A tense silence falls over the classroom. Despite the harsh dismissal, Duke Billion remains completely unfazed, his arms still raised high. Watching the exchange, Weiss clenches his teeth in frustration. He cannot comprehend her behavior, internally screaming, "What is wrong with this woman?" Outside the classroom, Academy instructor Chloe provides the answer to an unseen party. She explains that the reason Miss Milk is there is simply because they are currently short on instructors. Darius explains to Weiss that since the tag test, a significant number of upperclassmen have been requesting extra combat training outside of their regular classes. Weiss understands immediately. They're all fired up, unwilling to be looked down upon by the underclassmen. Chloe adds that this surge in demand necessitated hiring additional instructors, at which point she introduces the stern-faced woman beside her, Milk Avitas. Her thoughts, however, betray a deep regret. She internally laments that calling upon this particular person, Mika, was the greatest mistake they could have made, her worry directed squarely at Weiss. As if hearing the unspoken words, Mika's shadowy form looms over a startled Chloe, questioning if she is thinking something unnecessary. Chloe lets out a small, terrified yell. Her attention then snaps to Weiss, who flinches and quickly denies any wrongdoing, claiming he was just zoned out. Internally, he panics, wondering how she could possibly know what he was thinking. Mika simply responds, "I see." Her voice rings out over a vast, rocky training ground. "Very well. Push-ups it is." At her command, Weiss is already on the ground, straining to perform push-ups under the watchful eyes of Mika and his fellow students. The instructor stands over him, remarking that while it has been a while, he seems to have improved over the past few months. Weiss grits his teeth, sweat pouring down his face from the exertion. She leans in, a cruel smirk playing on her lips. A horrifying thought dawns on Weiss. She didn't come to this academy to teach, but specifically to torment him. Watching from a distance, Duke Billion expresses his confusion about the new substitute teacher. He is shocked, however, to see that for once, Weiss is actually listening and obeying orders without complaint. Instructor Mika Aotas' eyes widened in sheer fury, a nearby student gasping in shock at her sudden change in demeanor. Her rage was directed at two struggling students. She bellowed, questioning if they even considered their pathetic pace to be running. They could only stammer in response, terrified. She watched them with a cruel smile spreading across her face, her assessment clear. This academy, she concluded, was filled with nothing but spoiled brats. With that thought, she issued a command to the entire class, her voice echoing across the landscape. They were to continue climbing the mountain until sunset, an order met with a collective cry of disbelief. As the students despaired, Mika singled out Weiss Vincent with a grin. She added a special condition just for him. He would climb the mountain while continuously doing push-ups. Weiss could only look up at her, a strained smile on his face as he muttered that it was impossible. The sight of this spectacle horrified another student. With Mika's arrival, combat training had transformed into a hell within a hell. This new reality set in quickly. Whenever a training day approached, every student, from Duke and Allen to Carta, trembled in fear under the harsh sun. But after the relentless torment, a reprieve appeared. On this day, the students discovered that even a desert can have an oasis, a large, pristine pool. The group of male students, now shirtless, stood by the water's edge, whispering among themselves. They questioned the reason for the pool and wondered what their instructor could possibly be planning now. Their murmurs were cut short by Mika's sharp voice, apologizing for the wait. As she spoke, one of the boys noticed a group approaching in the distance, urging the others to look just as Mika's intense expression filled the view. She commands silence from the assembled students, who stand poolside in their swimwear. With a sharp tone, she announces that their water training is about to begin. The male students, including a tense Weiss Vincent and a stoic Duke Billion, stare forward, while the female students, like Cynthia and Carta, exchange confused glances. The training immediately devolves into a chaotic display of masculine fervor. Weiss, Duke, and the other male students erupt into a roaring, flexing frenzy, their shouts echoing across the water. Watching from the side, Chris Schlegel looks on with utter disdain, muttering about the stupid brats and their pointless posture. On a floating platform surrounded by water, a competition is underway. As Weiss Vincent skillfully maneuvers against his opponents, Duke Billion watches from the crowd, impressed by the display. He remarks that this level of performance is exactly what he expects from Weiss. His technique is precise. By using his weapon to hook onto his opponents, he deftly adjusts their balance. This causes the three women, Cynthia, Chris, and Carta, to be thrown off kilter, forcing them up and down uncontrollably. The rapid, bouncing motion creates a distracting spectacle for all to see. Watching from the sidelines, Duke Billion and the other male students are awestruck, calling it a godlike technique that only the top-ranked first year could possibly execute. The maneuver proves effective, as one of his opponents is sent splashing into the water while another is spun helplessly on the platform. After the match, Alan approaches Weiss, dripping wet and full of admiration. He declares that Weiss is amazing and the best, admitting he was completely wrong about him and offering his thanks. He turns back to the remaining female students with a smug grin, asking who's next. Their reactions are far from impressed. Carta, Chris, and Cynthia unanimously agree that Weiss is a scumbag and that boys are the worst. His confidence shatters as a new figure steps onto the platform. Mika Aodas, wielding a large spike club. She calmly announces that it's her turn, leaving Weiss staring in stunned silence. The sight breaks him. He cries out that he is seriously sick and tired of this recurring, unfortunate pattern. From across the platform, he pleads with Mika, insisting he's already done and wants to stop. His victory was short-lived. In the aftermath of the poolside competition, his male classmates, incensed by his methods, seized him and tossed him unceremoniously back into the water, where his defeated opponents still floundered. As a result of the boys' antics, the instructor became fed up and water training was canceled indefinitely. In the dining hall, the female students ate their meals, while the boys' side of the room remained conspicuously empty. In a now-quiet hall, Carta Viole sat by herself. As she ate, Cynthia Violetta approached with a tray of food, prompting another student to recognize Carta from across the room. Two other students observed her, one noting that Carta was eating by herself as usual. Her companion reasoned that since Weiss was now with Cynthia, Carta likely felt she would be in the way if she tried to join them. Her expression fell as she dwelled on the truth of their words. In the end, Weiss and Cynthia had become partners for the tag team event, leaving her on her own. The two gossiping students then approached her table directly. One taunted her, claiming she only avoided expulsion by leeching off Weiss's strength. The other mockingly told her to make sure she thanked him properly. Her patience snapped. Carta slammed her hand down on the table with a loud thud, her eyes glaring with sudden intensity. Startled, one of the bullies questioned her aggressive look. She shot back with fury, calling her tormentor a parasite. She declared that all the other girl was good for was flying, yet she clung to the academy by leeching off someone stronger. Unfazed, the bullies issued a threat. They warned Carta to be ready, sneering that without Weiss by her side, they would ensure she was expelled in no time. Just as they departed, Cynthia Violetta, flanked by Mika Aodas and Chris Schlegel, arrived at the table. Cynthia addressed her by name, and Carta looked up, her expression shifting to one of wide-eyed surprise and apprehension. She found herself confronted by Cynthia Violetta and Chris Schlegel, who extend an invitation for her to eat with them. Their intense, almost predatory smiles do little to put her at ease. The unexpected offer sends a wave of panic through her. In her mind, one problem has simply vanished only to be replaced by a new, more intimidating one. Her spiraling thoughts are interrupted as Cynthia addresses her directly from across the table, where she sits flanked by her two companions. Cynthia states that she has reconsidered her opinion of her, a declaration that leaves Carta utterly bewildered and only able to utter a questioning sound. She begins to explain, citing the recent joint tag team exam. Cynthia recounts how Carta and Weiss apparently worked together to defeat 24 students from the second and third years. Carta quickly refutes this, insisting with waving hands that Weiss accomplished that feat entirely on his own. Cynthia calmly notes that it was a record-breaking number nonetheless. Chris Schlegel, however, leans forward with a skeptical expression, stating that she doesn't believe even someone as skilled as Weiss could have done all of that alone. Cynthia agrees, attributing their success to Carta's flight magic and impressive abilities. She confesses that even if her own team had partnered with him, they could not have matched that score. She admits with a smile that it's frustrating, but they were completely defeated. Beside her, Chris's expression softens, and she sincerely asks Carta to continue looking after Weiss. Now standing together, the group's true intentions are revealed. Eva Everett explains they've wanted to talk to her for a long time and directly asks why she keeps avoiding them, leaving Carta flustered and speechless. Seeing Carta's flustered silence, Cynthia Violetta's expression softens into a gentle smile as she concedes, well, fine. She then formally extends an invitation, declaring that from now on, they will all be together with Weiss. She expresses her hope that they can all get along with Carta-san. Her eyes well up with tears as a blush spreads across her cheeks. Overwhelmed by this unexpected kindness, Carta can only manage a quiet, affirmative sound. Later, as the new friends sit down for a meal, Cynthia exclaims in confusion, wondering why their pot au feu is frozen solid. Despite the dish being cold, she cheerfully suggests they eat while the food is still warm. The strange occurrence makes Cynthia wonder about Weiss's whereabouts. Hearing his name, Carta blushes, also realizing that Weiss-sama is absent. Elsewhere, Weiss Vincent lies in a bed, his entire body wrapped in bandages. Mika Aodas stands over him with a pleasant smile. He asks if she will use mind healing on him. but she cheerfully refuses with a simple no. Back at the table, Cynthia explains what transpired after their exam. She reveals that thanks to the training she did with Carta, she was able to give the bullies a taste of their own medicine, which ultimately resulted in their expulsion. As she speaks, the two disgraced students are seen leaving the academy grounds for good. A young boy stands on a hill, his eyes wide with horror as he watches his entire village burn below. The roaring flames reflect in his pupils as he utters a single, disbelieving phrase, "No way." On that fateful day, he lost everything. A memory surfaces of a cherished family portrait, a mother, a father, a little sister, and himself, now shattered and smoldering in the ruins of his home. Years later, the boy, now a young man named Alan, trains in a rustic clearing. He speaks with a young woman about a place called the Noblesse Magic Academy, while a muscular man sharpens a tool nearby. His breath hitches, sweat dripping down his face. He turns to her, his eyes filled with a desperate hope, and asks if graduating from there would truly allow him to obtain the title of a noble. The young woman, Cheryl Elias, confirms it. She explains that graduates are said to gain authority equal to that of the nobility. She continues, detailing how even a commoner, once graduated, can enter dungeons all over the world. A map illustrates the vast network of locations that would become accessible, making travel between countries far easier. As the implications sink in, the muscular man, tending to a large roast over a fire, looks up, realizing the full weight of her words. His companion's realization sparks a dark thought in Alan. This power wasn't just about status. It was a means to an end. He could use his own hands to wipe out the monsters that stole his family and his hometown. This grim purpose solidifies into resolve. He looks towards Cheryl, his expression hardened. "I've decided," he states firmly. He declares his new goal with unwavering conviction. "I will take the entrance exam for Noblesse Academy." He recalled the time after making his decision. With the help of Cheryl, instructor Darius, and his training master, he prepared diligently for the Academy's entrance exam. But despite all his efforts, the outcome was not what he expected. His exam results were a complete disaster. He found himself utterly defeated, lying on the rain-slicked ground as his opponent stood over him. That opponent was Weiss Vincent, and his strength was terrifying. A cruel, triumphant grin spread across his face as he looked down on the fallen Alan. Despite this crushing defeat, a strange twist of fate awaited him. As he and Cheryl reviewed the results, he discovered that, for some reason, he had passed. But the joy of passing was short-lived. After enrollment, the Academy's point system nearly caused him to fail over and over. Weiss, who had bested him in the exam, loomed over him during his struggles, mocking him as a loser who was perfect for point farming, just like a slime. This relentless humiliation ignited a fire within him. With a roar of defiance, he declared he'd had enough, refusing to live a life where everything was taken from him. From that moment, a strange dynamic formed. He began to realize that, before he knew it, Weiss was always watching him. He wondered if Weiss, the top-ranked first year, recognized his strength. He came to believe that Weiss saw him as someone worthy of fighting. The feeling was mutual. He wanted to fight Weiss again. This shared desire for combat solidified his resolve. He vowed to catch up to Weiss, to keep winning until he could finally surpass him. The next time, he would be the victor. He looked up, his face bruised, but his eyes burning with resolve. Blood trickled from a cut on his lip as he called out his rival's name, making a solemn vow. "Weiss, I'll defeat you, just watch." That fierce determination quickly twisted into raw, unbridled fury. His face darkened, his teeth bared in a snarl of utter frustration. The source of his rage became clear as the scene pulled back. A classmate held him fast, preventing him from lunging forward. Across the hall, Weiss Vincent barely spared him a glance, turning to walk away with another student, his expression one of cold indifference. Weiss finally stopped and looked back, his voice laced with disappointment. "I expected more from you," he stated flatly. The dismissive words struck a nerve, and all Alan could do was roar his rival's name in helpless anger. In a wide, formal hallway, Alan stands his ground, calling out to Weiss Vincent, who stops and turns to face him. Several other students watch the confrontation unfold. His face twisted with rage, Alan clenches his fists and shouts, declaring with raw emotion that he truly hates Weiss. In response, Weiss's expression breaks into a wide, manic grin. He tells Alan not to worry, as the feeling is entirely mutual. As Weiss and his companions walk away, two onlookers discuss the tense exchange. One wonders what they were talking about, while the other observes that it certainly looked like an argument. The scene shifts to a vast, empty training courtyard, where the sharp, repeated sounds of clashing metal echo off the stone walls. The source of the noise is Weiss, furiously sparring with the training master. Their blades move in a blur, sweat flying as they exchange powerful blows. Watching from a balcony above, Mika Aodas rests her chin on her hand with a sly smile. She calls down to Weiss, remarking that he seems to be working hard. Below, he pauses his training, looking up at her, breathing heavily. He addresses her as Milk Sensei, his mind racing. He internally admits that he can't clear the distracting thoughts from his head. Mika lands gracefully beside him, getting straight to the point and asking if his distraction is about Alan. Elsewhere, Mika speaks with the instructor Darius. She reveals that she heard from him about the friction between Weiss and Alan, confirming that the two don't seem to be getting along. As he continues to train, Weiss's mind flashes back to his history class earlier that day. He thinks about Alan, concluding that he is too soft. The very thought of it, he realizes, is what infuriates him so deeply. The source of his deep-seated frustration was a lesson from some time ago, a stark reminder of how the country treats its slaves and demi-humans, symbolized by the heavy shackles on a pair of bare feet. In that memory, Weiss stood before his class and began the lecture by stating that most slaves originate from the children of impoverished families. He continued, explaining that these children are born to irresponsible parents with no money and are given no education, leaving them to either commit crimes or perish in the gutters. He was beginning to explain the system used to control such people when he was interrupted. With a startling intensity, Alan voiced his own belief. The slave system is not necessarily evil. His eyes were wide, burning with the unwavering conviction of his words. The controversial statement led to an immediate, tense confrontation. In the hallway after the lesson, Weiss gripped Alan's shoulder, his own expression a mask of cold fury as his free hand clenched into a tight fist. Recounting this memory to Mika Aoda's in the present, Weiss offered a conflicting version of events. He claimed that what he wanted to tell her was that Alan had said slavery is evil. He elaborated further, telling Mika that Alan, a person who almost never shows his emotions, had even gone so far as to declare that nobles themselves are not necessary. His fist tightened again as he confessed how much Alan's naive way of talking infuriates him. Mika listened, thinking to herself that she was surely not the only one who was shocked to hear him say such things in front of a crowd of nobles. She continued her internal analysis, concluding that Alan speaks as if simply avoiding conflict would solve everything, without offering any real solution. To her, merely saying, "War is bad," and nothing else was no different from empty preaching. She internally scoffs at the memory of Alan's words, dismissing them as nonsense. People, she believes, are driven by fundamental desires for sustenance, rest, and conflict. She recalls his argument. Even without slavery, war would create orphans, and his naive solution was simply that those with the ability to help should do so. Her reverie is broken by Weiss's voice. He asks if she is listening, snapping her back to the present. Startled, she quickly confirms that she is. She offers an explanation for Alan's perspective, revealing that he grew up in an orphanage. She suggests that perhaps Alan's words had a greater impact on Weiss than he might have initially thought. Her words visibly startle Weiss. Mika continues to ponder the situation, understanding why Alan might get heated over classroom theory, but still questioning why Weiss reacted so strongly, wondering if it was specifically because his opponent was Alan. He finally understands. A dark realization dawns on Weiss, and a sinister grin spreads across his face as he identifies the true source of his irrational anger from that day. His dark expression prompts a direct question from Mika, who asks with concern if he truly harbors that much hatred for Alan. Mika turns and walks away, remarking that there is nothing inherently wrong with having clashing opinions. She continues, however, that once one becomes an adult, such direct confrontations are often not permitted. Gripping the hilt of her sword, she turns back and issues a challenge. "Brace yourself, Weiss." The challenge is met instantly. Weiss lunges, his own blade drawn, and their swords clash with a brilliant shower of sparks under the full moon. During a strenuous training session, Mika Aodas instructs Weiss Vincent to keep his movements to a minimum. Ignoring her advice, he lunges forward with a shout, believing he has an opening. Mika, however, easily sidesteps his attack, chiding him that he doesn't understand. She leaps effortlessly over his head, remarking that fighting this way feels nostalgic. As Weiss's blade crackles with energy, she reveals a surprising fact. She was also once a student at this very academy. Landing on a balcony above the training hall, she continues, explaining that anyone enrolled in the academy will inevitably find themselves clashing with all sorts of people. Weiss stares up in disbelief, questioning her statement as their blades meet again below, sending sparks flying. His mind reels at the revelation, his face a mask of sweat and shock as he struggles to process the impossible. He internally recalls seeing Mika-sensei's profile from the original game countless times, yet he has never once encountered this piece of her history. Her expression softens as she looks down at him, confessing that this is the first time she has ever spoken of it. She admits that she kept it quiet because, honestly, she doesn't even want to remember it. She reveals the painful truth. She was expelled from the academy. Back then, the point system was less refined, and she was forced to leave before she could demonstrate her full strength, her record showing a score of 0. She struggles to accept this, thinking it impossible that Mika-sensei could have been weak. She counters his disbelief, stating that while she made excuses at the time, the simple truth was that she wasn't strong enough. She reminds him that everyone is weak at the start. She presses her point, holding her blade to his throat. She explains that, at the time, she had greatly overestimated her own power. As she speaks, the instructor Darius watches them from a balcony above. Mika concludes that the gap between perception and reality might have been what decided her fate back then. From his vantage point on the balcony, he observed the two figures in the training yard below. He had believed that humans do not change so easily, a thought directed at Weiss. Down in the yard, Mika Aodas echoed his sentiment, telling Weiss that she once held the same belief. But she noted he had changed. She continued, explaining that while convictions should be upheld, It's sometimes unavoidable to lose one's way, and that confrontations can be necessary. She offered a faint, knowing smile, adding that he was different from her. Unlike her, she stated, he already knew the correct path to follow. Her uncharacteristic kindness left him flustered and speechless. He wondered why she was being so nice today, his mind conjuring a brief, chaotic exchange where he questioned her sanity and she playfully threatened him. Her expression grew more serious as she considered his reaction. She supposed, with a thoughtful tone, that anyone could be kind. Shifting the topic, she instructed him to start thinking about his next training exercise. The sudden change caught him by surprise. She began to describe the next exercise, and a look of understanding dawned on his face. He realized it was already time for that particular trial to begin. An image of a harsh, snow-covered mountain range filled the mind's eye as her voice delivered a stark warning. Failure this time would result in a fate far worse than mere expulsion. The exercise is a brutal survival training held in the northern Garial Mountains, a place where dangerous monsters roam the snow-laden forests. It is an annual trial known for claiming the lives of participants. Back in the training yard, Weiss declared with confidence that he would not die. Mika cautioned him against such certainty, revealing that her own failure was a result of overestimating her strength. She continues her warning to Weiss, cautioning him not to become arrogant just because he was the top student in the lower grades. She doesn't want him to follow the same path she did. From a nearby doorway, Instructor Darius observes them as Weiss, with a faint smile, concedes that her point is true. To press the matter, she raises her training weapon and asks if they should spar a little more. A wide grin spreads across Weiss's face as he accepts the challenge, eagerly telling her to come at it. They immediately lunge at one another, their wooden weapons clashing with a sharp crack. Both fighters bear expressions of fierce exhilaration, teeth bared in wide, competitive grins. Their intense duel continues, filling the vast, pillared training hall with the sounds of their mock battle. From across the hall, Instructor Darius watches them for a moment longer before reaching for a switch on the wall. His voice suddenly booms, lights out. As the hall's lanterns extinguish, a large, masked figure appears and slams a heavy door shut, locking it from the outside. The sudden darkness and the echoing clang of the lock catch both Mika and Weiss completely by surprise. Outside, under the vast night sky, a full moon shines through the passing clouds. Back within the now silent hall, Mika and Weiss remain frozen in their fighting stances, bathed in faint moonlight. In the background, Darius turns and walks away, leaving them trapped inside. From the exterior of the grand building, Mika's voice breaks the silence, suggesting they rest for the day. Weiss's voice follows in quiet agreement. The Noblesse Magic Academy's training combat uniform is a specialized piece of equipment. When worn inside a pre-prepared magic circle, it activates upon taking damage, as a student is struck by a blast of energy. In exchange for this protection, the uniform reduces injury and pain by draining a significant amount of the wearer's magic power. Thanks to this system, students can engage in serious combat while remaining safe, a method that has produced many individuals who overwhelmingly surpass those of other academies. However, the academy itself acknowledges a harsh reality. Instructor Darius explains that in this world, there exist opponents against whom these advanced uniforms are completely useless. He continues his lecture to the assembled class, identifying these threats simply as monsters. He then announces that tomorrow's event will be a survival exercise in the northern Garial Mountains, a known habitat for these creatures. Elsewhere, two students discuss the implications. One informs Cardaviol that while it is possible to withdraw from the exercise, doing so will negatively affect their grades. Back in the classroom, Instructor Darius calls for those who are prepared to sign the necessary forms. Without hesitation, Weiss Vincent steps forward, his expression firm. He steps forward to the instructor's desk and formally signs his name to the volunteer sheet for the survival exercise. From their seats, the other students, including Cardaviol and the girl with the blonde ponytail, watch him commit to the dangerous task. His decision sends a ripple of unease through the classroom. Alan and Cardaviol, in particular, stare forward with wide, concerned eyes, clearly taken aback by his immediate participation. With his name on the list, he turns and walks back down the aisle toward his seat, his expression unreadable as he passes his classmates. He pauses beside Alan and Carda's desk, looking down at them with a challenging glint in his eyes. He then quietly suggests that they should withdraw from the exercise. The provocation ignites a fierce reaction. Their eyes lock in a tense standoff before Alan slams his hands on the desk and rises, declaring emphatically that there is no way he will withdraw. His outburst is met with calm indifference. Weiss simply states that he just felt like saying it. Carda, startled, questions the suddenness of it all, a sentiment Alan shares. Leaving them with his cryptic comment, he walks away. Alan watches him go, muttering to himself about Weiss's strange behavior, while Weiss continues on without a backward glance. Despite the odd exchange, their resolve is unbroken. Moments later, both Alan and Carda stand before Instructor Darius's desk, adding their own names to the list of volunteers. After they return to their seats, Instructor Darius looks over the now full sign-up sheet. A grimly satisfied expression crosses his face as he notes that everyone is participating, offering a terse word of thanks. His gaze fixed forward, Weiss reflects internally that the event is finally starting. He He silently wishes everyone the best of luck for what awaits them tomorrow. He stood over his defeated opponent, the previous duel already a distant memory. For him, all the training up to this point had been a mere warm-up. The true game was only just beginning. This new trial was far more severe. The Academy's expulsion system, once seen as harsh, was now revealed to be a form of mercy, a way to weed out those without ability early, reducing the number of pointless deaths in the trials to come. From this point on, failure would mean more than just expulsion. As heavy snow fell around them in the northern Gariel Mountains, the assembled students faced their instructors. Before the vast, unforgiving wilderness, the so-called death game was declared to have begun. Instructor Darius announced the first parameter of their trial. Its duration would be 3 days. He gestured toward the bleak, snow-covered woods, instructing them to form pairs and survive within its depths. He then reiterated the warning he had given them the day before. The forest was home to a large, unspecified number of monsters. While pairs that successfully defeated these monsters would be awarded points, Darius stressed that their top priority was, above all else, survival. As the students processed the rules, Weiss noticed Chloe Sensei among the instructors. Nearby, another student advised Cynthia Violetta to remove her earrings, explaining it was common sense to prevent frostbite. Just like the tag test, they would be sent to various locations in pairs. His attention, however, shifted to the worsening conditions. He knew that even in the game, the weather was a random variable, and a blizzard was the absolute worst-case scenario. The sickening nature of the event, now combined with the treacherous weather, soured his mood completely. Amidst the swirling snow, Instructor Darius's voice cut through the wind. He announced that the pairings for the survival exercise had been determined and commanded the students whose names were called to step forward. An instructor's voice cuts through the cold air, announcing the first pair for the upcoming event, Cheryl Elias and Lilith Scarlett. The two young women stand together in the snow, clad in matching winter uniforms. This pairing immediately catches Weiss Vincent's attention. It's a deviation from the original work. As Lilith politely asks for cooperation and Cheryl offers a friendly greeting, Weiss internally questions why they were put together. She, however, seems to accept the change with quiet resignation. Cheryl looks away, believing that despite the different partner, the overall scenario will likely remain unchanged. The instructor continues down the list, her voice clear as she announces the next team, Cynthia Violetta and Alan. He turns to his new partner with a simple, "Nice to meet you." Weiss observes this, noting that this particular pairing does, in fact, follow the original script. He recalls the significance of this moment. Cynthia is the main heroine of the game, and this event is supposed to be the catalyst that brings her and Alan much closer. His thoughts trail off with a flicker of doubt. Weiss watches them, a bead of sweat on his brow, acknowledging that while that should be the outcome, things may not go as planned. As if in direct response to his uncertainty, Cynthia turns her gaze away from Alan and directly toward Weiss. With a warm, confident smile, she declares, "I am devoted to you alone." Her unexpected declaration leaves Weiss flustered. He turns to Cheryl, who is standing nearby, and says that while he believes her, he has a feeling that's not how things will unfold. Cheryl looks back, startled. She responds not with confusion, but with a sudden burst of resolve. A confident grin spreads across Cheryl's face as she thrusts her fist forward, vowing, "I will definitely win." She watches as Alan places a hand on another student's shoulder, declaring that he won't lose to her. The student, Cheryl, agrees. Nearby, Weiss Vincent observes their easy camaraderie, noting to himself how well they get along. He continues his internal assessment, concluding that they are practically already dating and that no one would dare get in their way. This leads him to a familiar puzzle. If Alan has such an intimate relationship with someone like Cheryl, he wonders, why is it that in the original story, he ends up with Cynthia? He briefly entertains a darker possibility, questioning if Alan is simply a scumbag who has no problem being with two women at once, before dismissing the thought. Unbeknownst to the participants, a grim fate hangs over the friendly exchange. The conversation between Alan and Cheryl is destined to be the very last one they will ever share. As that moment passes, Weiss's attention is abruptly captured by a voice calling his name. He turns to see Cynthia approaching him through the falling snow. He reacts with confusion. Before he can respond to Cynthia, Carta Viol appears beside him, bundled in winter gear. She informs him that he's being called next for the pairings, clarifying that she is Carta. Weiss, still processing, asks who she is. Suddenly, a booming voice cuts through the air, shouting his name with startling intensity. The shout comes from Layman Kudavaretta, who points a finger directly at a stunned Weiss, roaring that they have been paired together. Layman throws a friendly arm around Weiss, who recoils from the touch. Undeterred, Layman cheerfully declares them partners for the next 3 days of the exercise. Weiss, face etched with annoyance, can only stare ahead. Meanwhile, as for Alan, his own path was about to take a tragic turn. To his already painful life, a further, devastating blow was about to be dealt. This impending tragedy would serve a grim purpose, to rapidly intensify his relationship with Cynthia Violetta. In order for them to overcome the hardship, a catalyst was required. The greatest trigger for the two of them to deepen their bond was a shared loss. Cynthia's expression turns somber as she walks through the snow-covered woods, the weight of this fated event settling upon the narrative. The catalyst is revealed with chilling certainty: the death of Cheryl Elias, an event destined to occur during this very training exercise. In the snow-covered northern region of Mount Gariel, a 3-day training exercise is set to begin for the Academy students. As 2 students trek through the wintry forest, one of them, a girl with pinkish hair, contemplates a grim possibility. She recalls that during this training, if events unfold as they did in the original story, she knows a tragedy is imminent. Her specific fear crystallizes into a single, dreadful thought: her companion, Cheryl Elias, is fated to die. The snow falls silently around them, blanketing the bare trees of the vast, cold forest. Suddenly, the quiet is shattered as something bursts from beneath the snow, kicking up a flurry of white. The unseen threat rockets through the snow, and a distant voice cries out a warning: "Weiss, it's headed your way." He turns, his expression calm and focused, acknowledging the alert with a simple, "Yeah." His hand tightens on the hilt of his sword, already aware of the approaching danger. "I know," he confirms to himself. As the creature closes in, a dark energy swirls within his eye, activating a power he calls Dark Eye. The attackers are revealed: a pack of monstrous, sharp-toothed white rabbits, screeching as they leap to attack. Unfazed, Weiss grins with predatory confidence, aiming a small crossbow at the incoming horde. He moved like a blur through the snow, his blade a flash of silver. The monstrous rabbits fell before his onslaught, their howls cut short as he carved a path through their ranks. Elsewhere in the snowy woods, his partner, Duke Billion, met the threat with brute force. With a mighty roar, he sent one of the creatures flying with a single, devastating punch. He followed up with a powerful kick that launched another rabbit skyward. But in his fervor, he failed to notice a third creature at his feet, which sent him tumbling into the snow. From a distance, Weiss watched the chaotic display, the sounds of Duke's battle cries echoing through the trees. He rested his sword on his shoulder, a dry thought crossing his mind: how truly scary. Their combined efforts proved effective. With the immediate threat neutralized, an official announcement declared that points had been awarded to the Weiss-Duke pair. As they continued through the woods, Weiss found it strange that he had been paired with Duke. His partner, however, was already focused on the next objective, urging them to move on. He recalled Duke's background: the eldest son of a knightly family, a student who specialized in body enhancement magic rather than traditional swordsmanship. This pairing was a deviation from the events he knew. In the original story, he and Duke were not partners. He surmised the change must be a result of their current academic standings. He didn't know the exact criteria for the pairings, but he considered the nature of the test. In a survival situation where stamina was paramount, his partner was an undeniable asset. Duke stopped suddenly, turning to him with a serious expression. "This musclehead is a jackpot," he stated, then paused. "Wait a second, Weiss." He walks alongside Weiss through the snowy landscape, pointing out that the training exercise is set to last for 3 days. He reminds Weiss that securing essentials like food and shelter is part of the test, then complains that he hasn't eaten all day and suggests they take a break. In response to the suggestion, Weiss remains silent, his expression unreadable. This prompts Duke to question their strategy, asking why they are hunting monsters so relentlessly when they should be securing supplies. He wonders aloud if Weiss has his priorities backward. His partner's logic leaves him utterly bewildered. Without turning around, Weiss gives a stark, simple reply: "They will not be eating." He then turns his head slightly, his gaze sharp and resolute as he reveals the full extent of his strategy. For the next 3 days, he declares, they will hunt monsters without any sleep or rest. The sheer audacity of the plan hits Duke with full force. His face contorts in disbelief as he lets out an incredulous roar of protest. In the snowy forest, Weiss Vincent explains his logic to Duke Billion. He states that the forest is already filled with lower-ranked students, and that the weaker a monster is, the more cautious it tends to be. He continues, clarifying that as time passes, the weaker monsters are picked off, leaving only the tough ones, like the 2 ferocious, bear-like creatures shown as an example. After hearing this explanation, Duke asks if Weiss still wants to rest. Weiss, looking strained, immediately says no, thinking to himself that he is pushing things too far. Companion's intensity causes Duke's eyes to widen. He realizes with a shock that Weiss's entire argument about earning points was just a made-up excuse. As Duke stands stunned, Weiss internally acknowledges that there is no benefit to wandering around in the cold without even eating. He feels sorry for Duke, who he considers a stamina monster, but will still have to endure this hardship. Despite the guilt, Weiss steels himself. He cannot afford to rest. His true motivation becomes clear in his thoughts as he stares out into the falling snow. He must hurry and find her, no matter what. Watching his partner, Duke quietly says Weiss's name, then pauses. He briefly considers telling Weiss his own real reason for being there, but dismisses the idea, believing it wouldn't have been convincing. Suddenly, a completely different idea strikes Duke. He breaks into a sweat, staring at Weiss in wide-eyed disbelief as he wonders if his companion is, perhaps, a genius. His misunderstanding blossoms into enthusiastic agreement. He grabs a startled Weiss, declaring that he now understands the strategy. The longer they wait, the fewer weak opponents there will be. He cheerfully pulls Weiss along, chiding him for not explaining his brilliant plan from the start. Dragged Weiss through the snow, but Weiss's expression remained fixed and grim, his eyes locked on some unseen goal. Companion, however, bounded ahead with comical energy, completely misreading the situation and wondering to himself what could possibly be wrong with Weiss. Their journey through the blizzard eventually led them to a small cave carved into the mountainside, where a lone figure stood waiting at the entrance. Inside the relative shelter of the cave, Lilith stood watch over a small campfire. Huddled beside the flames for warmth was another young woman, her arms wrapped around herself against the chill. She turned her attention to the seated girl, asking if the conditions outside had improved. The girl, Shirley, confirmed that the blizzard showed no signs of letting up. Her assessment was correct. The snow continued to fall heavily, making travel impossible. Seeing Shirley's discomfort, Lilith offered her a steaming cup, explaining that she had melted and warmed some fresh snow for her to drink. Gratefully, Shirley took a sip from the warm cup and thanked her. Lilith advised her to be careful and not drink too quickly, lest she upset her stomach. She held the cup. Shirley's thoughts turned to her companion. This was Lilith Scarlet, the personal maid of the infamous Weiss Vincent. She had expected the maid of such a man to be a terrible person. Instead, she found Lilith to have surprisingly polite manners and a gentle demeanor. More than anything, however, Shirley was taken aback by her strength, having witnessed her single-handedly dispatch a beast in the snow. Her awe was only reinforced when Lilith returned, proudly holding a large kill. Shirley noted how her companion treated the difficult, snowy terrain as nothing, taking down monsters with terrifying speed to secure their food. Back in the relative warmth of their shelter, she couldn't help but voice her admiration, telling Lilith that her magic was truly amazing. Lilith, however, turned the praise back onto her, explaining that the reason they could rest safely was thanks to Shirley's own magical threads, which formed a protective web. She elaborated that unlike humans, monsters have a poor ability to detect magic, causing them to walk right into the traps. This prompted Shirley to admit she was a rearguard type, expressing how glad she was to be paired with a vanguard like Lilith. As she spoke, Lilith noted that it was about time for the trap's magic to fade. Understanding the need, Shirley prepared to recast her spell. Announcing that the trap's effect was wearing out, she declared she would go set it up again. As the magical threads began to snap, she stepped out of the cave. She ventured alone into the falling snow, the darkness of the woods pressing in around her. Suddenly, she was no longer alone. The shadows shifted, revealing monstrous, grinning maws as a pack of beasts emerged from the darkness surrounding her. The silent snarl, a massive, two-headed wolf-like creature lunged, its jaws gaping wide to strike. The fangs closed in, a desperate cry cut through the air, Lilith's voice shouting Shirley's name. She walked through the heavy snowfall, her expression thoughtful. Beside her, Lilith kept pace, offering a gentle smile. Her journey was being watched. From the darkness between the trees, a pair of pointed ears twitched as a low voice observed that it was dangerous to go alone. Watchers emerged from the woods, a pair of monstrous wolves, one wreathed in faint flames. Yet, instead of hostility, the lead wolf stammered nervously, conceding that she was right and offering a clumsy apology. Seemingly unfazed by the strange beasts, she turned her head slightly to address her companion. As she began to speak to Lilith, two small, flickering flames materialized in the cold air beside her. She then commented on the path ahead, noting that Lilith's footsteps were so quiet that it was unnerving. Her friend could only let out a small, questioning sound in reply. Shirley's mind drifts to the past, recalling the faces of nobles who saw her not as a person, but as a commodity. They would remark on her lineage, acknowledging her only as the Elias family's child, a daughter of a great house, their words dripping with expectation. She reflects on this lonely upbringing, a memory of her younger self clutching a stuffed rabbit coming to the forefront. Ever since she was young, no one had ever called her by her given name, Surely, bitter memory fades, returning her to the grim present, a remote wooden shack nestled within a dense forest, where one of her captors stands guard at the entrance. Inside, the situation is just as bleak. Shirley is bound to a thick wooden post while her two kidnappers converse, one letting out a derisive laugh. One of the men, the one with spiky hair, remarks on her composure, finding it fitting for a noble. He then reveals her value to them, stating that the brat is worth 10 million pel. He leans in, his voice laced with scorn, telling her she should be glad she's from the Elias family, as her name is the only reason she's worth so much. Elsewhere, a pair of boots strides purposefully across the grass. The determined gaze of a single, focused eye signals an imminent arrival. Determined individual is Weiss Vincent. He arrives at the kidnapper's hideout, his presence immediately drawing the attention of the spiky-haired thug standing guard. Before the guard can fully react, he is sent flying backward by a powerful blow. His bald companion cries out in astonishment, shocked that a mere kid could possess such strength. Stands calmly in the now open doorway, a faint, confident smile on his lips. The first thug lies defeated on the floor before him, as the second looks on in utter disbelief. Swift victory over the kidnapper did not bring relief, but panic. Shirley, still bound to the post, cried out for him to stop, pleading for a chance to talk, believing herself to be utterly defenseless. The plea dissolved into a terrified scream, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and confusion. Shock sent her spiraling into a memory of another time she had been captured. In this vision of the past, a different young man stood with a sword, her two captors already defeated and strung up from the ceiling. He had approached her then, his sword held loosely at his side as he looked down at her. He introduced himself simply, "My name is Alan." His words were direct and reassuring. "Shirley," he had said, "I came to save you." Shirley recalled the moment with perfect clarity. It was as if a clock that had long been stopped inside her had finally begun to tick forward again. Her eyes, even in the present, reflected the weight of that memory. It was the very first time she and Alan had met. She remembered learning that Alan was a commoner, raised in an orphanage, and that he held a powerful dream to create an equal world. She recalled him explaining his vision of a society without the divisions of nobles, commoners, or slaves, a concept she had found impossible to believe at the time. Meanwhile, far from Shirley's turbulent memories, Weiss Vincent walked alongside a fully armored companion. He was lost in thought, contemplating the very nature of such ideals. He acknowledged to himself that while they might seem like empty talk, he was indeed aware of them. Shirley's memory continues to unfold. She recalls a young Alan, standing resolutely before Zevis Aldine, the captain of the Royal Knights. The boy vowed to prove his worth through his actions, a declaration met with skepticism from the captain, who called him a persistent brat. Following this plea, Alan begged Captain Zevis to take him on, and so his training began. She remembers that when she was young, just like him, she longed for a world of equality. But unlike Alan, she felt she couldn't show it through her actions. Before she even realized it, she had fallen for him. More than that, she found herself wanting to become like him. After that, she and Alan, along with another companion they had somehow ended up with, stood together. As the first step toward achieving their goal, they decided to enroll in the Noblesse Magic Academy. Memory takes a dark turn. Shirley recalls her own gasp of horror as rain began to pour from the sky. The scene flashes to the brutality of the entrance exams. Another student viciously strikes Alan, leaving him bloodied and broken as Shirley calls his name in terror. The pouring rain, as Alan lay defeated. Shirley recalls the infamous man they met there. It was Weiss Vincent. During the entrance exams, he had used his immense talent and power to do as he pleased, unnecessarily and brutally beating Alan. His cruel, smiling face is seared into her memory. Shirley walks through the academy halls. She is flanked by two other students who are gossiping animatedly about Weiss. They question what kind of dirty tricks he might have used to dominate the top spot in grades, even citing a rumor that he used Carta as a human shield to ambush seniors during the tag exam. Shirley listens, her expression growing visibly annoyed. Slanderous words reach Alan's ears. He turns abruptly, his face a mask of disbelief as he processes what was said about Weiss. Immediately rejects the accusation, telling Shirley it can't possibly be true. Alan concedes that he and Weiss do not get along, but he firmly asserts that Weiss would never resort to such dirty tricks. His strength, Alan insists, is something he built through genuine effort. Certainty is absolute, born from direct confrontation. Alan declares that he knows this because he fought him. He could sense that Weiss possesses true conviction. Shirley, however, is not swayed. I don't think so, she murmurs, her expression turning troubled. She believes Alan is naive, thinking to herself that he simply doesn't understand the inherent ugliness of the nobility. Shirley reflects on the nature of nobles. To her, they're a class that acts righteous but will readily commit dirty deeds when needed. Treating slaves cruelly or even assassinating political rivals is just an everyday occurrence for them. Because she grew up in such an environment, she harbors a deep-seated dream to see an equal society where nobles no longer exist. Observing her from afar, two classmates misinterpret her intense expression. They feel sorry for her, assuming Weiss must have done something awful to make her look so terrified, just like Cardasan. One of them, however, finds it hard to believe that someone like Weiss, despite all the bad rumors, has actually done anything wrong. Shirley's own thoughts are far less charitable. To her, Weiss is the lowest of the low, absolutely the worst. Her brooding is suddenly interrupted by a sharp knock at the door. Inside her dorm room, sitting on the edge of a lower bunk, she hears her name being called from the entrance. She looks up, and her mind flashes back. For some reason, Weiss had come to her room. It was the day before the survival training. In memory, Weiss stands before her, stating he came to see her. He immediately brings up the topic of the next day's training, bluntly telling her to withdraw from it. He responds with confusion, asking why he would tell her such a thing. She points out that he had said the same thing to her earlier that day as well. Explains his reasoning plainly. He has seen her abilities and believes the training is too dangerous for her. He doesn't think she would be able to handle it. The flashback, she firmly declares that she won't withdraw, no matter who says what. Back in the present, this memory sparks a new thought. It's strange. She and Weiss have barely even talked. Why, then, would he be worried about her? He's startled by a loud banging on the door. It is Weiss, looking distressed. He wonders aloud if simply asking her is a futile effort. In response, she tells him there is no point in continuing the conversation. She reminds him that she still has points to spare, implying she doesn't need his help. Turns away, his shoulders slumped, and mutters that he has no intention of talking anymore. His dejected reaction leaves Shirley bewildered, as it makes no sense to her. Confusion deepens as she tries to understand his behavior. She questions what is wrong with him, suspecting his apparent concern is just a ploy to make her lower her guard. She wonders if this is how he plans to take down his rivals. She concludes that this must be his strategy. The reason he's dominating the competition, she reasons, must be because he has pulled manipulative tricks like this over and over again. Her thoughts then drift to the people around him. She surmises that Cynthia is likely being blackmailed by Weiss into being his fiancée, and that the two girls constantly with him are no different. She believes that Lilith, too, must be forced to obey him as a maid. But as this thought crosses her mind, a flicker of doubt appears on her face. She stands there, lost in thought. Another student approaches from behind and places a hand on her shoulder, startling her. Student leans in and quietly tells her that there are some things you just can't say. Blonde-haired student listens as Shirley insists that Lord Weiss is a wonderful person, though her conviction wavers for a moment as she looks away. She reaffirms her own stance, standing alone before their snowy shelter, declaring internally that she is not being used and is there of her own free will. Thoughts drift to her partner, Lilith, and the obvious admiration she holds for Weiss. Shirley reflects that while they have grown closer during the 3 days of the exercise, she had accidentally stepped on one of Lilith's landmines. By the 3rd day, their partnership had proven effective, and they were steadily accumulating points. It worked in perfect sync, with Shirley setting traps and casting protective magic as they safely dispatched monsters together. It felt a growing comfort in their dynamic. While their combat synergy was good, the most important part for Shirley was that Lilith treated her as an equal, not as a noble. Despite this growing camaraderie, Shirley recalls with regret how she ultimately caused Lilith to become angry with her. Memory forces a difficult question into her mind. Could it be that the terrible rumors about Weiss are actually false? Her introspection is shattered when Lilith's voice cuts through the silence, announcing that one of their traps has been triggered. Shirley looks up, startled. Lilith peers out from their shelter into the snowy woods, stating that she needs to go and reset it. She sleeps soundly, her breathing steady and deep. Shirley watches over her, recalling that Lilith couldn't sleep at all during the blizzard. So her current exhaustion is not surprising. Slumber, combined with the lingering awkwardness from their argument the previous night, solidifies Shirley's decision. Believing it's better not to wake her, she resolves to go alone and quietly exits their shelter. She ventures into the stark, silent forest. A flicker of apprehension crosses her face. She tries to reassure herself, thinking that as long as she returns soon, everything should be fine. Solitary trek is abruptly halted. A low, guttural growl echoes through the trees, and she finds herself facing a monstrous, wolf-like beast wearing a bone-white mask, its fangs bared in a vicious snarl. The lone creature was not alone. More beasts emerge from the shadows of the surrounding woods, their forms identical. The pack closes in, cutting off any path of escape as a cry of terror escapes Shirley's lips. Terror fills her eyes as one of the wolves lunges, its maw wide and filled with sharp teeth. A moment later, a spray of dark blood arcs through the air, staining the snow-dusted trees. In a snowy clearing, Carta Viol lies on the ground, surrounded by snarling, wolf-like beasts. Nearby, Shirley looks on with wide-eyed shock at the scene, seeing the aftermath of a battle where several traps have already claimed some of the creatures. Shock turns to grim recognition as she clenches a fist, mistakenly identifying the down girl and calling out the name Lilith. In response to the threat, she draws a sharp, black dagger, her expression hardening with resolve as she prepares to leap into the fray. The fierce lunge, she strikes down one of the demon wolves, the impact sending a spray of dark blood as the rest of the pack snarls in agitation. She continues her assault, a blur of motion amidst the chaos. From a higher vantage, the full scope of the battle is revealed, a snowy clearing dotted with numerous traps and the bodies of fallen wolves on the ground. Carta looks up at her rescuer and apologizes, mistakenly addressing her as Lilith. She explains that this predicament is her fault, as she had gone to set the traps alone. Shirley cuts her off, stating that an apology isn't necessary. She instructs Carta to focus solely on taking down the enemies before them. She speaks. Shirley whirls around, swinging her blade. She takes stock of their opposition, realizing with alarm that there are dozens of demon wolves charging toward them with ferocious growls. While fending off another beast, she internally processes the dire situation. There are far more monsters than she had sensed 2 days ago, leading her to conclude that the initial few must have called for the rest of their pack. Despite the overwhelming odds, she fights on, her movements swift and precise. From her position on the snow, Carta watches in awe, thinking to herself that Lilith is steadily and skillfully thinning out their numbers. She had thought that, with Lilith's amazing skill, they could actually win this fight. A sliver of hope had begun to form. Momentary hope shatters as a lone wolf lets out a piercing howl, calling for reinforcements. Shirley's face falls in shock as more beasts emerge from the trees. In response, a massive pack of demon wolves emerges from the forest depths. Carta looks on in disbelief, realizing the sheer number of new arrivals. She urgently tells Shirley they must run, warning that if they get surrounded in the forest, they are done for. As they turn to flee, a wolf lunges, sinking its teeth deep into Shirley's arm. Carta cries out her name in alarm as the attack connects. Reacting instantly, Carta thrusts her hand forward, unleashing a spell. She calls out magic threads, and a vast, sticky web erupts between the trees, ensnaring the entire pursuing pack. She turns to Shirley, commending her for the move. Carta believes the web she cast should buy them a little time to escape. The wolves temporarily halted. The two of them make a desperate dash through the snowy woods. She runs. Shirley clutches her wounded arm, realizing she is losing too much blood. The wound isn't closing, and she deduces that the wolf's saliva must contain something that prevents blood from clotting. Her desperate flight leads them not to safety, but to the very edge of a sheer, deep cliff. Their escape route is cut off. Standing at the precipice, Shirley looks back, her face pale and bloodied. With the growls of the wolves closing in behind them, she utters a single, despairing word. A cliff. Steps are unsteady as blood continues to drip from her wound. The world begins to blur before her eyes, her strength failing. As her consciousness fades, a grim vision flashes through her mind. Death. She sees Weiss and Carta fighting desperately in the distance. But in her mind's eye, the wolves are already upon her, and it is all over. Bleeding cut under her eye, Carta Viol glares forward, declaring that she will not lose. From a short distance, Alan watches her, his face shadowed and his thoughts unreadable. Elsewhere on the snowy battlefield, Shirley struggles to her feet, trembling but defiant. Clutching her sword, she vows that she will not die. Her resolve is anchored by a powerful motivation. She has a goal to create a world of equality, and she must survive until she graduates from the academy to see it through. She cannot give up now. Echoing this sentiment, Carta Viol clutches her own wounded shoulder, her expression hardening with determination. No matter what happens, she reaffirms to herself that she must not die. Her defiance is met by the ferocious advance of two massive, wolf-like beasts, which lunge forward with a terrifying roar, their sharp fangs bared. In that critical moment, a figure raises their hands, palms open, as a swirling vortex of dark energy begins to coalesce between them. The figure is revealed to be Weiss Vincent. Kneeling on the frozen ground, he slams a hand down, unleashing a powerful spell as he commands, "Dark Heal." A wave of dark magic washes over the area. The charging beasts are halted as the energy envelopes them. At the same time, Carta looks down in shock, noticing her wounds are rapidly closing as the healing magic takes effect. With his allies recovering, Weiss surges forward, drawing his sword and charging directly toward the stunned beasts. Leaves Carta speechless and stunned. Beside her, Shirley's eyes widen with recognition and utter awe as she exclaims, "Lord Weiss!" Halts his charge, turning to order his companions, Carta and Shirley, to crouch down and stay put in the snow. As the demonic wolves snarl and prepare to pounce, he specifically warns a stunned Shirley to stay back as well, while Carta looks on in bewilderment. Faces the pack with a confident smirk, taunting the demonic wolves that they can't hope to win with numbers alone. From her position, Carta's mind races, questioning why Weiss is even there. Suddenly, a new warrior roars, leaping over the pack to join the fray. Shirley recognizes him as Duke. Weiss immediately establishes a strategy, telling Duke to take the front while he guards the rear, an order Duke readily accepts. Two fight back-to-back with brutal efficiency. Sweat drips from Weiss's brow as he battles fiercely, while Duke lands a powerful punch on one of the monstrous wolves. In the aftermath, the snowy ground is littered with the fallen bodies of the wolves. Weiss and Duke stand amidst the carnage, panting from the exertion of the battle. Catching his breath, Duke remarks with a grin that there were certainly a lot of them. A completely exhausted Weiss can only agree. He then turns to Shirley, loudly complaining that he hasn't slept at all and is still fighting. He shouts in exasperation, demanding to be allowed to rest, and exclaiming that there were a hell of a lot of wolves. Watching the pair, Shirley explains to Carta that Duke is her childhood friend. She notes that he's the type of person who gets along with anyone, as his easygoing nature suggests. She adds a crucial detail. However, Duke never opens his heart to people he truly dislikes. This implies his willingness to fight alongside Weiss is a sign of genuine respect, even as Duke appears to doze off on his feet from exhaustion. He stood silently over a dissolving wolf carcass while, nearby, Shirley turned to Carta with a knowing smile, remarking on how much trust Duke had placed in him. Noble turned his head slightly, a faint smile on his lips as he told the exhausted Duke to get some rest. The sight prompted a realization in Carta. Lord Weiss truly was a wonderful person. As the group stood amidst the vanquished wolves, Shirley voiced her concern that Duke might freeze to death if they let him sleep in the snow. Carta, however, dismissed the worry, confident that Duke would likely be fine. Just then, a figure stepped out from the shadows of the surrounding trees. It was Cynthia Violetta, who seemed to have been drawn by the commotion, her eyes fixed on the group as she softly questioned if it was indeed Weiss in the clearing. She had heard a loud disturbance and came to investigate, her gaze sweeping over the scene. It became clear to her that they had been battling a pack of demonic wolves. A flicker of surprise crossed her face, followed by a touch of disappointment. She observed that the conflict was already over, lamenting that she was too late to participate. Three of them, Weiss, Cynthia, and Carta, now stood together, surveying the silent, snow-covered battlefield littered with the dark forms of the defeated wolves. Duke remained fast asleep amidst the carnage. Suddenly, Cynthia's gaze sharpened on a single wolf carcass. A twitch ran through its body. She realized with alarm that while the other demonic beasts were dissolving, this one was not. A snowy clifftop, Weiss, Shirley, and Alan stand victorious over the dissipating remains of several defeated wolf-like creatures. As she gazes at Weiss, a single thought consumes Shirley's mind. She has something she must tell him. Stealing her resolve, she steps toward him, calling his name. He turns his attention to her, his expression calm as he asks what she wants to say. Her gaze is earnest as she looks up at him. With a slight flush on her cheeks, she begins by thanking him for saving her. She continues, expressing her sincere gratitude for everything he has done for her until now. As she speaks, Weiss's eye twitches, a subtle sign of some internal reaction. Suddenly, a massive, shackled wolf beast, much larger than the others, appears behind her. Her expression shifts to one of solemn resignation as she whispers an apology. Her eyes widen in sheer terror as the beast's own eye flashes with a menacing light. An instant, the creature lunges, sinking its fangs into her shoulder and violently shoving her backward. From the side, Weiss and Cynthia cry out in horror. The force of the attack sends her tumbling over the edge of the high cliff into the vast emptiness below. Weiss rushes to the precipice, his face a mask of disbelief and anguish as he screams her name. Far below, Shirley looks up at him, her body plummeting through the air. Without a second of hesitation, he dives off the cliff after her, plunging headfirst into the abyss in a desperate bid to save her. He gritted his teeth, straining as he plummeted through the open air. With a desperate lunge, his hand closed around Shirley's, securing a firm grip as they fell together from the snowy precipice. As they fell, Shirley looked up in terror, her voice a desperate cry of Lord Weiss, as she watched him plummet into the abyss alongside her. Meanwhile, on the clifftop, the chaos continued. Cynthia, still perched atop the downed Duke, could only stare in wide-eyed shock at the wolf beast standing just a short distance away. Paralysis was broken by a sudden roar. Alan, spear in hand, charged furiously at the beast, closing the distance in an instant. His weapon found its mark, striking the creature's head. As Cynthia cried out, another student beside her delivered the grim news. It was too late. Weiss had already fallen from the cliff. The word struck Cynthia with the force of a physical blow. She whipped her head around, her expression one of dawning, absolute horror. She remained frozen, unable to process the information, muttering, "No way, no way," under her breath. Disbelief shattered, replaced by a crushing realization. Tears welled in her eyes as she understood the truth. Weiss had fallen because of her. She grappled with her guilt. Alan stood at the very edge of the chasm, his gaze fixed on the depths below with an unwavering, fierce determination. Without a moment's hesitation, he launched himself over the edge, diving into the abyss after Weiss, his mind set on a single, unspoken promise. He dives headfirst into the abyss, his expression a mask of fierce determination. Far below, Weiss Vincent continues his uncontrolled descent. From the clifftop, Cynthia and Shirley can only watch in horror. "Save him!" Shirley screams, her voice filled with desperation, her plea directed at the falling Alan. Sharp, cracking sound echoes through the darkness as a crystalline surface fractures under immense pressure. View reveals the source, the jagged, icy ceiling of a cavern, with sharp stalactites hanging like teeth. In the oppressive blackness, Weiss Vincent's face emerges. His eyes are squeezed shut, his brow furrowed as consciousness returns. A single, disoriented question forms in his mind. Am I dead? Thoughts immediately spiral, questioning his own actions. Why did he save Shirley? He recalls risking his own life, wandering through a treacherous, snowy mountain for 3 agonizing days. Decision makes absolutely no sense. His sole objective in this world is to avoid his own ruin. There was no logical reason for him to save her. Yet, a memory surfaces with painful clarity. Shirley, lying dead in the snow as she did in the original story. He realizes with a jolt that he desperately wanted to destroy that specific outcome, no matter what. His mind drifts further back to his previous life. He remembers sitting in a dark room, game controller in hand, weeping when Shirley died in the story. Even knowing it was just fiction, the event had shaken him. He recalls the online discussions that followed. While some corners of the internet left hateful comments, calling her sheltered and celebrating her death. He had never seen it that way. He had silently raged, telling them to shut up. He remembers her true character from the story, her desperation to catch up to Alan, giving everything she had. That determination was what had given him courage. Lying in bed, the truth crashes down on him. His face twists in anguish. It's just too cruel, he thinks, for a girl like her to be given nothing but a tragic dead-end route. A desperate shout pierces the air. It is Alan, calling out for Weiss, his mind racing with the thought that he must shatter this dire outcome, no matter the cost. The source of the echo is revealed, a vast, subterranean cavern. By the light of a small, crackling fire, Alan stands over the still form of Weiss, who lies unconscious on the damp ground near an underground river. Slowly, Weiss's consciousness returns. He looks up to see Alan's face, murmuring his name as a question. Looking at his own hand, he wonders if he is truly alive. Alan offers a simple greeting, "Morning, Weiss." View pans to the dark, watery passage from which the two must have been washed ashore, a silent testament to their ordeal. Later, seated by the fire, Alan explains that after they fell, they were swept away by a river below and washed up in the cave. When Weiss, now shirtless, asks what he did, Alan simply states that he saw Weiss falling and jumped in after him. His simple answer does not satisfy Weiss. His expression hardens as he glares at Alan, insisting that such an explanation is insufficient. He argues that even with a river, the fall should have been fatal. Memory surfaces in Weiss's mind. Another time, they had miraculously survived against all odds. A pattern of impossible luck is beginning to form. Suspicion solidifies into a direct accusation. "Don't play dumb with me," Weiss snaps, confronting Alan about using flight magic. He demands to know when on Earth Alan could have learned such a thing. He continues his interrogation, laying out the cold logic of the situation. He explains that surviving such a drop would be impossible without using flight magic to control their descent, and pointedly asks how someone like Alan could even possess such an ability. Leaning forward, his eyes blazing with intensity, Weiss corners Alan with a final, non-negotiable demand. "Answer me. Exactly how did you save me?" Watches Alan by the fire, dismissing the immediate question of their survival. His thoughts turn to suspicion. According to the lore of the original game, Alan shouldn't even be capable of using magic. He wonders what the dark-haired boy could be hiding. In response, Alan turns his head, his expression sharp. He deflects the unspoken accusation, stating that more importantly, if anyone is hiding something, it is Weiss. His accusation catches Weiss completely off guard. "Hiding?" Weiss repeats, his brow furrowed in confusion and indignation. Alan then reveals what he knows, recalling a specific event. He explains that Shirley told him that Weiss had gone to her room the day before the training exercise to demand that she drop out. Memory prompts Weiss to reflect. He recalls Shirley mentioning she felt pressured, and he internally concedes that visiting a girl's room so late at night was a mistake that likely terrified her. Across the fire, Alan remarks that he honestly can't picture Weiss doing something so underhanded. Tone shifts, becoming deadly serious. Alan looks directly at him and asks a piercing question. "Weiss, did you already know that Shirley's life was going to be in danger?" The implication of the question strikes Weiss with force, his eyes widening in shock. After a tense moment, Alan states that he has nothing to hide about their earlier conversation. Weiss bluntly replies, "No." He then admits it was exactly as Shirley said. She was getting in the way of him scoring points, so he pressured her. Hearing the simple, selfish reason, Alan smiles and offers an equally simple explanation for their survival. They simply fell into the river and were swept away. Weiss is left momentarily speechless, processes this exchange, coming to a frustrating conclusion. Alan acts completely oblivious, but he is surprisingly calculating. Weiss can only let out a small sound of irritation. He observed Alan, who was holding what appeared to be a cooked snake. Weiss internally questioned the grotesque offering, yet noted to himself that, strangely, he felt no irritation. Alan, for his part, found Weiss as frustratingly unlikable as ever, but offered him some food anyway. Despite his reservations, Weiss accepted. Sitting together on the rocky floor of the cavern, He quietly offered his thanks to Alan. Alan responded with a light laugh, telling Weiss he was welcome. Their brief moment of camaraderie was a small point of light in the dark, cavernous passage. Further down the passage, unnoticed by the two students, lay the massive, dark silhouette of a winged beast. It was a great reptilian monster. Its horned head and powerful limbs sprawled across the cavern floor, utterly still. Its eye was open, a sliver of white consciousness watching from the shadows. In a damp, rocky cave, Weiss Vincent stands over a seated Alan, calling out his name to confirm he is awake. Having regained consciousness, Weiss stretches his arms and asks Alan how long he was out. Alan looks up, explaining that it has been about half a day and that morning will be arriving soon. A bead of sweat trickles down Weiss's temple as the reality of their situation sets in. It is just as he had feared. Alan confirms that the announcement for the end of the training did occur, but happened while Weiss was unconscious. Weiss elaborates that since the announcement, which should have been broadcast into their minds, never reached them, their friends are most certainly searching frantically for them right now. Alan confesses that he initially tried to carry Weiss out of the cave, but found that he couldn't. Weiss, surprised, asks why he was unable to. Turns to Weiss with a grave expression, explaining that it's because of something in the cave that Weiss has yet to notice. Weiss's gaze follows Alan's direction into the deeper darkness. His eyes widen in terror as they reflect a horrifying sight, a dark eye, and he is paralyzed by shock. Stared in disbelief at the creature before him, a silhouette of a beast wreathed in dark, smoky energy. His mind reeled, questioning what this monster could possibly be. As he struggled to comprehend the sight, Alan stood firm, sword drawn. He remarked that the presence of such a monster in this place defied all logic. The magical pressure was so intense that Weiss's heart pounded, every instinct screaming at him to flee. Alan continued his explanation, stating that the creature's powerful magical aura was likely interfering with any transmissions, which is why no one had been able to pinpoint their location. His eyes remained fixed on the beast. Weiss confirmed to himself that it was undeniably a monster, wondering if its stillness meant it was asleep. He glanced back down the tunnel they had come from, his expression grim. It was a dead end behind them. Their escape route cut off, he understood their predicament. To get out of the cave, they had no choice but to head straight toward the creature. At that moment, Alan spoke, explaining that he had held back from making a move until Weiss woke up. He reasoned that trying to move an unconscious person would have put them in serious danger. Weiss processed this information, a bead of sweat on his temple. He internally cursed Alan's typical protagonist-like behavior, though he understood the logic. His thoughts were cut short as the shadowy beast began to stir. Startled, he watched it closely, questioning if it was starting to move. Alan observed its new movements, noting that it was merely changing its position. He pointed out that it wasn't heading toward them, but also wondered if it was making its way toward the exit, and Weiss moved cautiously through the cavern. Weiss points ahead, suggesting they tail the creature, letting it guide them to the exit. Noting their coats are too heavy for being soaked with water, he decides they should abandon them. Alan silently agrees. Ahead, a brilliant light pierces the darkness, marking the way out. Their path is blocked. The massive creature is waiting for them right outside the entrance. Sight stops them cold. Weiss's eyes widen in horrified recognition. Before them stands a dragon, its powerful form and leathery wings filling the space outside the cave. It confirms their fears, identifying the beast as a dragon. Weiss explains with dread that this is a monstrosity not meant to appear until the story's final stages. He knows precisely what it is, just as the creature lets out a low, guttural growl. Immense pressure radiates from the dragon, a testament to its overwhelming offensive power, vast mana reserves, and an absolute defense that repels all attacks. As they draw their blades, Weiss grimly states that the creature's level and stats are far beyond what they can handle at this moment. He internally despairs, questioning why an endgame level enemy, one meant to be faced only after extensive preparation, is appearing in a place like this. Train of thought is shattered as he shouts in alarm. The dragon has seen them. His eyes widened as he took in the scene before them. The dragon wasn't focused on him and Alan, but on two other figures in the snowy clearing. He recognized them instantly. One, a swordsman, stood defiantly with his blade drawn, shouting at the massive beast to stay back. In the snowy, barren forest, a man with a shaved head stands defensively, two swords drawn. He shouts in frustration at his companion, insisting that they should have waited for help to arrive. Observing from a distance, Vincent's expression is tense. He recognizes the pair as underclassmen and wonders aloud if they, too, have been stranded. Source of their peril is revealed, a large, winged reptilian beast. As the swordsman, Bosworth, trembles, his companion Shirley calmly tells him to relax, reminding him that she has said many times that the creature is just a giant lizard. She flips through a book with a smug look, assuring the terrified Bosworth that she knows her material. She explains that the creature he calls a dragon is not listed as such in the Mount Gariel Complete Guide, created by her grandmother. Passage in the guide is shown, issuing a caution. The northern part of Mount Gariel experiences severe climate fluctuations, which makes the monster ecosystem unstable. She continues to read. A bead of sweat appears on Shirley's face. The guide explains that on rare occasions, powerful monsters from other areas may come to the mountain to hunt. Unseen by her, the beast looms directly over them, drool dripping from its maw. Suddenly, the beast snatches Bosworth. He cries out in panic, demanding to be let go and yelling for Miss Lavish to do something. In the commotion, her guide falls from her hands into the snow. As Bosworth struggles in the creature's grasp, its mouth begins to glow with intense heat. He stares in horror, realizing with dread that this supposed lizard is about to breathe fire. Watching the horrifying scene unfold, Weiss turns to Alan. He asks if Miss Lavish is listening, accusing her of trying to use Bosworth as a shield and suggesting they should escape while they can. Alan, however, remains still. He states grimly that those two are beyond saving now and that there is nothing they can do even if they intervene. In the distance, the beast prepares to incinerate its captive. Stood silently, his gaze fixed on the unfolding horror. Beside him, Vincent dismissed the student's fate as mere bad luck, something that couldn't be helped. Silence broke as determination hardened his features. Drawing his sword with a sharp ring of steel, a single resolve echoed in his mind. He was going to save them. In response, Weiss lunged forward, shouting in exasperation. He called Alan an idiot, insisting there was no way he could win against that dragon. Though he admitted he fully expected this reaction, his frustration was palpable. He continued his frantic warning, gesturing towards the beast as it prepared to unleash another torrent of fire upon the helpless Bosworth. Weiss insisted that Alan should be able to sense the immense power difference himself, and that to fight it would undoubtedly mean his death. Alan was unmoved. He met Weiss's gaze and stated firmly that he was not running away. Weiss began to argue back, trying to make him see the reality of their current situation. Grabbing his shoulder, Weiss's expression was pleading, but Alan's resolve was absolute. He shouted that he simply did not want to run away, his voice filled with conviction. Passionate declaration hung in the air. Weiss fell silent, his expression softening from anger into quiet contemplation as he stared at his comrade. Meanwhile, the beast paused its attack, holding the captured student in its maw. It turned its massive head, its attention suddenly diverted. Still trapped, Bosworth's initial confusion gave way to a grimace of pain as he struggled within the creature's grip. A glint of light streaked across the beast's eye, the reflection of an impossibly fast object hurtling towards it. The massive beast stood over the fallen Bosworth, its maw open in a roar, seemingly oblivious to the attack, streaking towards it. As it loomed, Alan surged forward, ignoring Weiss's protests. He thrust his hand out, casting a dark heal spell as an offensive maneuver toward the creature. He announced he would create an opening for the others to escape, but Weiss, his face twisted in a furious grimace, shouted that he was paying back his own debt. As a volley of explosions struck the beast, Weiss seemed to have a realization. Finally understood. A voice in his own mind accused him. He had been jealous of the protagonist, Alan. Weiss reflected on his own feelings of inadequacy, believing that lazy people like him could never hope to catch up to a protagonist who runs straight ahead, no matter how hard the struggle. Watching Alan strive so earnestly, he couldn't help but feel completely pathetic by comparison. He realized this feeling was why he couldn't forgive Alan. He felt the same way, but he refused to end up left behind. He would not be like that. This newfound resolve, he declared that from now on, he would no longer chase after a protagonist he couldn't catch up to. Instead, he roared with fierce determination. He was going to run alongside him. Together, they leaped toward the beast just as a massive column of destructive energy erupted from below, engulfing the creature. As the beast reels from the energy column, the coordinated assault begins. Alan strikes its head directly while Weiss summons an unnatural wall in midair, kicking off it to propel himself downward. He lands with his sword pointed, ready for his own strike. The furious roar. Alan screams a curse at the lizard bastard as his attack connects with its head. The beast's eye glares at him for a final moment before a massive explosion erupts from the point of impact, engulfing the area in a blinding flash of destructive energy. With his companions watching from the safety of a cave, Alan casts Dark Heal. He declares that he is paying back his debt, while Weiss shouts that he will create an opening for the others to escape. He leaps towards the massive dragon, determined to survive and return to everyone's side. Dark Heal ability functions as intended, beginning to plunder the immense magic power directly from the enemy beast. His stolen power surges into Weiss, amplifying his own magical reserves to an extraordinary degree. He realizes that with this boost, he is probably even stronger than the S-rank adventurer, Milk Sensei. The gravity of their situation sinks in as he identifies the dragon as a boss-level monster that should have only appeared in the final stage. However, Weiss grits his teeth against the strain. The sheer volume of magic plundered from the dragon is too massive, and he knows this state won't last long. He feels as if his body is about to tear apart. He thinks through his strategy for managing the overload. As a safeguard, he is having Alan bear 20% of the plundered magic. While they could have technically split it evenly 50/50, concluded that at only 50% of the power, his attacks would be too weak to inflict any significant damage on the dragon. Therefore, he decided to concentrate 80% of the magic into himself to act as the primary attacker. Alan, with the remaining 20%, would focus entirely on dodging and acting as a diversion. This would give Weiss the chance to find an opening and strike. As Weiss lunges, he accepts that his body will blow apart if he maintains this 80% power level for too long. But before that can happen, Alan prepares his own counter, resolving to channel all his magic and the dragon's into the tip of his blade. He lunged forward, sword aimed true at the dragon's massive eye, determined to finish the beast. His blade shattered upon impact with the dragon's hardened scales. As the beast roared, Alan screamed for his partner to act now. From his vantage point, Weiss watched in dismay as the attack failed to deliver a fatal blow. It was useless. He heard Alan's desperate cry, urging him to run while he still could, but Weiss remained frozen, stunned by the turn of events. Shock was cut short as the dragon's colossal tail whipped through the air directly towards him. He knew a direct hit would be fatal. Reacting instantly, he summoned an unnatural wall. The magical barrier materialized just in time, absorbing the devastating impact of the tail strike before shattering into pieces. The force of the blow sent the dragon stumbling, its attack thwarted. Across the clearing, Alan stood his ground, watching intently as two observers, Shirley and Bosworth, looked on from a safe distance. Beast quickly regained its footing, coiling with renewed aggression, stared, panting at the sheer, terrifying power he had just faced. He understood with chilling certainty that if he hadn't mastered the unnatural wall, he would have been utterly annihilated. Sharp pain shot through him, and he grunted, realizing he had reached his limit. A fleeting thought of gratitude for Carta, who had taught him the life-saving spell, crossed his mind. His body wouldn't hold out any longer. He had no choice. He decided to use the cover of the smoke and dust to deactivate Dark Heal for now. As he released the spell, the immense power dissipated, leaving him kneeling in exhaustion. On the ground before him lay a small, clawed remnant of the dark energy he had been containing. Defensive wall, unable to withstand the dragon's might, shattered in a brilliant flash. The concussive force of the explosion blasted him backward, sending him hurtling helplessly through the air. Tumbled uncontrollably through the forest, his body snapping thick tree trunks on impact. From the ground, Carta Viole watched in absolute terror, her voice a desperate scream as she cried out his name.